Good morning and welcome to the Los Angeles City Council. Today is Tuesday, March 21st, 2006. We are meeting as we do every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. Here in John Ferraro Council Chambers in room 340 of City Hall, the third floor of City Hall. These meetings are open to the public and we invite members of Los Angeles community and the community at large to join us here for our public comment and to comment on matters before us. We are being broadcast live on Channel 35, LA City View, on all the city's cable systems. We also are being webcast through our city's homepage at www.lacity.org, a great site where there's a wealth of information on your elected officials and on the legislative and administrative happenings here in the city of Los Angeles. We are also broadcast on Council Phone, which is a number you can call to listen to this Los Angeles City Council and to our committee meetings as well, to follow along from the comfort of your own phone wherever you may be. We are awaiting a quorum. We need 10 members or 2/3 of the 15 council members to begin our meeting. But we have with us already council members Grewal, Labange, Perry, Smith, and Zine, and myself, Councilmember Garcetti. That gives us 6 members, and we are waiting 4 more to begin our meeting. So I'd like to ask council members Cardenas, Council members Huizar, Council members Padilla, Parks, Reyes, and Rosendahl can make their way down. Council members Hahn and Wesson and Weiss are excused today. So as soon as we have 10 members, we will begin this meeting. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reyes. While we're waiting, we want to wish a very happy birthday to our Sergeant at Arms, Steve. Happy birthday. Thank you, Mr. Cardenas. We are at 8, just awaiting 2 more members. Thank you, Mr. Huizar. 9 members, 1 more, and we will begin. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Cardenas, Grewal, Hahn, Huizar, Labange, Padilla, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Weiss, Wesson, Zine, Garcetti, 10 members present and a quorum, Mr. President.
All right, our first order of business, as is customary at the beginning of the week, is to salute the flag. If we can please all stand, and Mr. Cardenas, if you would lead us in the salute to our flag.
Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we move on, I know that we were saddened to hear the news this morning of the passing of State Assembly Member Marco Firebaugh, and I know Mr. Cardenas, who served with him, would like to say a few words. So, Mr. Cardenas.
I just wanted to concur with that announcement, and at the adjourning of today's council will adjourn in his memory. He also served with now Council Member Wesson, former Speaker, and he was his majority leader. And if Herb is not able to make it, he wanted me to say a few words at the end of our adjournment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cardenas, and he's a dear friend of the city of Los Angeles as well, and to many people around this horseshoe. We're quite saddened to hear that news this morning. Let's go to the minutes. Next order of business.
Approval of the minutes.
Mr. Zine moves. Mr. Smith seconds. If there is no objection, that's unanimous vote. So ordered.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Mr. Padilla moves and Ms. Gruhl seconds. If there's no objection, that's also a unanimous vote. Those are approved.
Mr. President, this is the time for comments from the public on items not on council's agenda.
Okay, colleagues, now it's time for public comment. We do have one speaker card out in Van Nuys, so why don't we go out to Van Nuys first, and then we'll hear from our speakers that are here. Sharon Brewer, I believe, is out in Van Nuys. Welcome, Ms. Brewer. You have 2 minutes, and I know there's still not a clock out there in Van Nuys, so we will let you know when 2 minutes is up. But thank you very much for coming down to our Van Nuys City Hall.
Thank you for making this available so I don't have to come downtown. The reason I'm speaking is I'm talking about an event on April 2nd that is planned at Lake Balboa, and there's a discussion of closing part of the park to the public and restricting the access to it. I have a solution to them not being able to, or not having to close the park to the public, in that instead of using the south end of the park, that they could take and use the grassy area that is north of the waterfall. It's flat, and they could fence it in and charge the admission that they want to take and do, and it wouldn't impact the people that use the park. I went there on Sunday, and there were approximately 233 cars that were parked along the edge of the road into the park, and approximately 97 cars in the parking lot. The park is heavily used, and for part of it to be taken away for an event, I have no problem with the person charging for the event, but I think that there's a better way of doing it than closing it to the public. Also, most of the signage about the event on April 2nd is not in English. I have a flyer, or part of a flyer that's here, which I know is probably going to be hard for you to see, but it doesn't give you much information about the event. Sorry about that, it's hard to see around the thing.
That's okay. We have a good shot of it. Thank you.
Oh, did you? Good, thank you.
You have about 20 seconds left.
Okay, there's a thing in the front, a banner in the front. It's on this side, this side, and it doesn't really say anything. It just says things in English, like basically Sunday, and the name, the time, oh, I'm nervous. The phone number. The other thing is, this is a picture of the area that I'm saying that could be used and fenced off very easily. It's by the road. And if the people visiting the event want to go and use the rest of the park, the vendor could use like hospital bands that shows that they've paid.
If I can ask you to wrap up, please.
Okay, basically the community has not known about the closure of this part of the park. I am on the Encino Neighborhood Council. I first learned about this on the 28th of February, where Recreation Parks was there, and a deputy from CD6.
Okay.
I would appreciate somebody looking into this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate your testimony today, and we'll make sure. Mr. Cardenas, would you like to say something?
Thank you very much. We appreciate the feedback, and we're constantly reviewing all the events that we have at this park that is over 2,000 acres. And these are good suggestions, and we're taking this into account. And my representative, Linda Leviton, I'll be letting her know about the testimony right now, and also constantly reevaluating this event and many others. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cardenas. Our next speaker here in City Hall is Ziggy Cruz, to be followed by Robert Blue and David Thompson. Welcome.
Good morning, council members and Honorable Council President Garcetti. I'm Ziggy Cruz. I live in Hollywood, and I'm concerned about the governmental system of the City of Los Angeles and the ongoing abuse of its power of eminent domain. I'm sure that a lot of people out here in Los Angeles are wondering about the same thing. How can a vote be taking place in a public hearing, including the City Council, even before or after the public speakers have just completed their concerns? This question became even more so important to me after the March 2nd, 2006 public hearing of the city's redevelopment agency. At this particular hearing, item number 1 was the request of resolution of necessity for the Hollywood Vine project, which means eminent domain. And in this case, 30 small businesses are being put out on the street through that. Council President Garcetti spoke in favor of that item, which means Council President Garcetti seems to be supporting eminent domain for private gain. At this particular hearing, a number of public speakers voiced their concerns, President Speaker included, and asked the commissioners to take all the new facts and statements that were given that day in person and in writing into consideration before rendering a decision. Then the Board of Commissioners came to a unanimous vote the same day in favor of item 1. I had the opportunity to speak briefly after the decision to Chairman Jackson and asked him if he came into that hearing with an open mind and no prejudgment in his, in the back of his mind. And he stated that all the documents presented and the statements given that morning were nothing else but a tactic to delay the project, and the project just has to move on. I must add that during this hearing, especially during the public comments, the commissioners enjoyed a catered breakfast while making a life-altering decision for the property owners, business owners, and the employees. If any of the council members should feel that there's something wrong with this, please give me a call. You can reach me at 323-462-3296. I believe that it is never too late to revisit any kind of situation of this kind of power.
Thank you, Siggy.
And also, you can join us on Saturday. We have an event in Hollywood if you have any,
Thank you.
statements that you want to share with the public. Thank you.
Robert, Blue?
Good morning, Council President, Honorable Council.
Good morning.
What's wrong with these two stories? In last week's Business Journal, the mayor offers public assistance to a European-based company that has a worth of $3.5 billion to stay and not redevelop its building. But then on March 2nd, the Los Angeles Redevelopment Agency votes to condemn small property owners and force out 30 small businesses at Hollywood and Vine, only to turn over the property for a Starwood Luxury W hotel. Where did this reverse Robin Hood mentality come from? No matter how you slice it, a $300 a night hotel is not a public use, it's a privileged use. In their staff report, the CRA stated that our small property was blighted because of the number of parking spaces was under current code, which wasn't true. But then the same report says the project block was mostly vacant land and surface parking lots, too much parking. And then finally, to rub salt in the wounds, the developer at the urging of the city is asking for a 10% reduction in parking. And what's interesting about it, it's mostly vacant land because the MTA used it for public use and condemned and destroyed buildings, including the Gilbert Book Building. All four sides of this project block are surrounded by developments that don't use taxpayer dollars or use eminent domain to turn over land and buildings to private developers. The Broadway Lofts, the Equitable Building Lofts, the Nederlander Claret mixed-use project. All of these projects offer skilled construction trade jobs and will offer permanent jobs paying living wages. And there was no outreach to the business owners. There's one letter sent, and yet the developer gets time after time help, including they couldn't get it privately financed apparently, so they're offering $180 million worth of California low-interest tax-free bonds. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blue. David Thompson is our next speaker, and then Karen Bonadillo.
I'm David Thompson, also known as Sky Anderson. I have a charity called Hope for the Homeless Children, and in the past we've gone out and found homeless mothers and their children and put them up in motels and give them counseling and tried to help them. Now I have an executive director in Pomona who takes kids into her home. Last time I talked to her, I asked how many kids does she have, and she says 6. A lot of these kids are homeless. She took one lady in their home, one young woman at 15, now she graduated from high school. Most of their parents are addicted to drugs and they end up in and on the street, but these kids staying with us. I want to make amends to Tom LeBon. I was at the front of the Chinese Theater about 3 months ago and taking a picture of him while he was talking, and some paparazzi got in front of me and I got quite angry and disrupted the whole thing, and I need to apologize to him. I got a great picture of you. If you want it, I'll bring it by your office. Mr. Garcetti, you look quite regal up there. I see you as governor or president. I mean, you just look like you belong up there. And Mr. Rosendahl, I respect your ability, your desire to take care of these senior citizens against corporate greed. I was at Midnight Mission a days ago, and they had homeless children there who were being abused by the staff, and I called the director, Mr. Clancy, and he refused to do anything about it. These children are innocent. They don't belong in be treated that way, and I would suggest that Clancy get programs to help these kids. Midnight Mission is funded by a lot of millions of dollars, and these kids don't deserve to be abused and be treated by this institution. Ms. Perry, you might look into it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. Our next speaker, Karen Bonadillo, followed by Don Garza.
Good morning. I'm here for my encore performance of Friday because not many of you were sitting in your seats, so here we go again. Elephants, LA Zoo, $40 million, new proposal. Folks, as a California state licensed contractor here in Los Angeles, I guarantee you it is not going to end at $40 million. We call that in contracting a lowball estimate. Let's look at the history of the LA Zoo. The sea lion cliffs and the zoo entrance went over budget 40%, starting at $19.3 million. The final cost was $27 million. Let's take our $40 million, council members, times it by 40% overage. That's $16 million. We're at $56 million. I'm going to round it out to $60 million. This is a ridiculous waste of taxpayer money. As a taxpayer and resident of Los Angeles, I'm appalled that anybody would even think that this would be something we should think about. As reported on ABC World News tonight, this city has over 86,000 homeless people, the largest population in the United States. Let's use our money to help our people. Mr. Reyes over here has a wonderful and noble plan of stopping gang violence here in Los Angeles. Let's put our money to that. What about after-school programs for kids? That's where this money should go. This is a no-win situation. This is something that shouldn't even be on anybody's agenda. Let's get past this. Let's stop it now. Let's move on. Let's follow the lead of the mayor, who has stated repeatedly he doesn't believe elephants should be in the zoo. Let's move on to more important issues. And frankly, let's just end it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bonadillo. Our next speaker is our resident town crier, Don Garza.
Council members, Honorable Jan Perry. Our neighborhood in Central City East is undergoing a wonderful transformation. This week, I think it was, the LA Times reported that everybody is now collaborating and have decided on a course of action to take together. Many people in my community, including myself, have been calling that we not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We knew that that was the best course of action to take. It took many years, but finally the city, the business community, the police department, and even the ACLU is given a go-ahead to begin to separate the homeless people that need the help from those that pitch tents to sell drugs and do the criminal activity in my community. And I congratulate the business community and this city council for pushing forward on those issues. But because I have hope and I've seen the changes, the leverage that we have been given with the city attorney warning the hospitals that they shouldn't dump people out in Skid Row, just this weekend, I witnessed myself, I called the hospital on behalf of somebody and said, if you throw my friend out that has cancer and you just throw him in the street, I will contact the city attorney. Guess what USC County did? They had him see a social worker, and now he's going to find a place to live. This is wonderful opportunities. Where do people get off saying that this city council and these business communities, they are saving lives? We'll still fight some of the things that they might come up with sometimes. But there's another issue, and I have hope that it will be heard. We know that there are children living in Skid Row. We know they are weak. We know that there are those who are addicted that are living on the street. We know that there are those that are illegal immigrants that are afraid to go into the missions. There has been a pervasive pattern over the past however long to allow not just registered sex offenders to use that place as a place to do whatever they want, but people that are not registered sex offenders to do whatever they want.
Thank you, Mr.
It is
Garza.
time, yes, sir. It is time that we those of us that live there that know that this pattern of abuse is going on are taken seriously by the Los Angeles Police Department. Because right now, we have one of those sex offenders sitting on our neighborhood council right now that has never been caught for what he does by going out and preying on young Latino men, buying dope and luring them into our hotel.
Thank
So
you, Mr.
I would
Garza.
hope that we get something done about it, be taken seriously when we bring
Thank
up
you.
these things. Thank you very much.
We appreciate everybody's public comment and remind folks that they can come down to Van Nuys to make that public comment or here at City Hall, and we thank you all for taking time out of your day to testify. That closes our public comment. If I can ask some special guests to come forward to the podium, I wanted to introduce, colleagues, if I can have your attention just briefly, a newest addition to our council chambers. I know we've got our meetings going at 10. We've got the padded pews now and Council Gazette. A suggestion of Mr. Labange and a few others was to have council ambassadors for some of our members of the public that come here to explain how the city council works, to be able to answer questions and to walk people through what can sometimes be a very confusing process. So I'd like to welcome, and hopefully we can give them all a round of applause, the Los Angeles City Council ambassadors, who have been training with my Deputy Chief of Staff, Ana Guerrero, and have been watching our meetings and now have their official red shirts which identify them for members of the public. They'll be in the back at our council meetings. A friendly face here. We have Jose Avila, Michelle Garcia, Priscilla Hernandez, and Mary Melikjanian. They're all seniors at John Marshall High School, barristers. They're currently off track. Michelle is a senior class president, and all with the exception of Mary live in CD13. Mary lives in CD4, which I know Mr. Labange was very excited about. They just went through a 3-part training. They learned about how LA City government is organized, how the city council passes legislation, and then they learned the council meeting rules. So they're a good resource for us colleagues as well, should we ever forget any of the rules, and they've been observing for the last 2 weeks our city council. It's a pilot program, but it's a goal to establish a formal program with the city clerk, and if you have high schools or places for future ambassadors, let us know. And I want to thank Marshall High School teacher Steve Zimmer for identifying such excellent young people and making sure that they get school credit for participating in the program. And lastly, thank Claudia Dunn from the city clerk's office for her help in developing this program. So again, let's welcome them. Please use them as a resource, members of the public, and we hope that they will continue to promote open and accessible government. Welcome aboard. Okay. So first order of business.
Item number 1 is an item notice for public hearing, and it's Plum and Budget and Finance Report and Ordinance.
Okay. Anybody wishing to call item 1 special? I think we do have a speaker card on that, but that will, so why don't we, but that has had a public hearing, I'm sorry?
It's a required public hearing item.
Okay, so we'll call that special. The card.
Next items are also public hearing items 2 through 6, and the recommendation for council action would be to continue the hearing in ordinance to April 11th, and I believe there is a card on item number 2.
I think it's for actually 21. Is Rabina Sewell, did you want item 2 or number 21? Ms. Sewell? 21, okay, that's what I thought. Okay, there's no card on number 2, so we'll open and close the public hearing for that. Anybody wishing to call any of these items special? Items 2 through 6, colleagues? If not, let's open the roll on them.
Mr. President,
Yep.
council can just continue those to April 11th.
Oh, those are for continue. Okay, I'm sorry.
Ballot.
All right, let's continue those. Next batch, please.
Next item is item number 7, and that's also a public hearing item. The applicant consents to a continuance to April 4th. Excuse me, April 5th.
Okay, there's no objection. That item will be continued. Okay, next items.
Next items are items for which public hearings have been held, items 8 through 29. Items 8 and 9 are confirmations of commissioners. Do you wish to hold those on the desk?
Yes, let's hold those on the desk, please.
Then that would leave before council 10 through 29.
Okay, colleagues, 10 through 29. Any specials? Mr. Parks.
Number 10 and 11.
Okay, 10 and 11, Mr. Parks. Mr. Padilla?
Number 12 and 24.
Okay, 12 and 24, Mr. Padilla. Other specials, colleagues?
27 yet?
We have, 27
I'd
before
like
us?
to continue that 2 weeks, please. 27.
Okay, is there any objection to continuing item 27 for 2 weeks, colleagues? If not, we will do so. And I'd like to call 22 and 25 special. Any other specials, colleagues? All right. And public hearings have been held on these as well? I'm sorry.
Yes, they have.
Okay. So with that, let's open the roll on the balance, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Those are approved. Next items.
Next items are items for which public hearings have not been held. Items 30 through 45, 10 votes are required for consideration.
Okay. We have 30 through 45, colleagues. Specials, Mr. Parks.
Just have 26 forthwith.
26 we will send forthwith. Any specials 30 to 45? Let's open and close the public hearings on those. And if there's no specials, please prepare the roll on the balance and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Okay, those are approved.
And the ordinance on item number 30 goes over for 1 week.
Correct.
That would take council back to the items called special. The first item called special is item number 1, and that was for a card from the public.
Okay. Item number 1, if I can call forward Robert Blue, please.
Thank you. Good morning again. When we're looking at planning and land use issues in the planning department, I know one of the things I experienced with the planning department, it definitely seems that the large developer kind of gets moved to the front of the line and treated differently. In fact, one of the issues that came up on the Hollywood Vine project was one of the commissioners actually told the developer to change their wording from major construction to construction so they could work longer. I mean, it doesn't seem like that's necessarily in the city's interest, especially when across the street is a residence for senior citizen. And secondly, following up, there are going to be some planning and land use issues discussed on Saturday near Hollywood and Vine at 1 o'clock. As Ziggy mentioned, you can call her at 323-462-3296. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blue. That closes our public comment. Anybody wishing to be heard on item 1? If not, let's open the roll on the item, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Okay, that will go over since we don't have 12 members for second reading. Okay, next item.
Next items are items 8 and 9, and those are confirmations to the Housing Authority and Ms. Chana Grace and Reverend Altagracia Perez.
If I can invite both of our nominees forward to the table. And I know Mr. Wesson is excused today, but certainly as the chair of HCED, he would let everybody know that both of these fine nominees were unanimously approved in our committee of HCED, and want to just welcome both of them and call on Mr. Reyes to say a few words.
Thank you, Council President. I had the privilege of sitting in committee when our honored guests made themselves available to us, and I asked them both a couple of questions regarding their experience. I know Ms. Grace has been very much involved in housing, working with different sectors, has been involved in my district with a very exciting project at Avenue 5051, and now a fairly large complex on Avenue 26 right next to the rail station. But I wanted to ask both if you give us your point of view in how we expand the accessibility of housing for those who cannot afford to live in Los Angeles, some thoughts, some strategies, and how you might participate in the committee to promote that type of an exercise. So, hate to put you on the spot, but I think we will all learn from your great experience in the past.
I think it's going to take a lot of hard work and a lot of really looking at the public's assets that are held through the Housing Authority and being creative and finding solutions that will further the development of housing for those with modest means.
Please hold my time.
I would just add that I expect to be educated a great deal about the various kinds of funding strategies that are possible in terms of expanding the housing that's made available to people. I also think that in that process of my being educated, I'll try to see the ways in which other folks who have decision-making power or influence, especially the community, can bring their influence to bear on dealing with this issue, because a lot of folks are dealing with a lot of issues that have to do with stabilizing people's lives, but as someone mentioned to me, you can't do that if you don't have a place to live. And so I expect that that will be part of a process, along with lots of creative ideas, which I look forward to learning about.
Well, there is one concept that I hope you will investigate and put on the table, and that would be to decentralize the concentration of folks of certain income groups in one place. When you have that type of density in one place, it asks for other kinds of problems and issues that are hard to control, given the number of people that are there. So my assertion would be to invite those who would want to invest in these places and look at the concept of mixed income environments.
Yes.
If they have other facilities and other places in the city, could we decentralize those who are living there so that it does not become or does not continue to be an economic ghetto?
Right.
And if you look at the strategic places these housing facilities locate throughout our city, I strongly believe we can re-identify, re-establish, redesign these facilities to have mixed income. If you look at your air rights, you look at the notion of going vertical, perhaps there, with good design, good architecture, and community input, redefine those locations by redistributing the income groups so it's not concentrated as economic ghettos. And I believe that will relieve a lot of the pressures that are established because of the density. So I'd like to put that on the table for you. I say it here for the record, because I would love to ask you in 6 months, what did you do with that concept? Did you actually promote it, propose it? And what was the reaction of investors who would be interested in the parcels that you do control? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Mr. Parks, to be followed by Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to welcome both of you here. Ms. Grace, I haven't had a chance to work with you, but certainly your reputation is outstanding. And Reverend, certainly I've known you for years, and being a resident of the 8th District, we're even more pleased to see that you're going to be on this commission because, as you know, in your dealings on a variety of issues in the community, you know that in many instances in the 8th District and surrounding areas, we're the poorest of the poor. And one of the big issues is housing, but again, you also realize that just stacking poor people on top of poor people isn't the answer either. And so we are looking for an ability to look at a renewed emphasis in how we treat the housing issue, but also we've also seen in some of our private developments the ability of people bringing in resources such as computer labs and other kinds of activities that help those who happen to live in those housing areas. I have a particular concern, and we'll be talking about it at some point, is that we want to make sure also that the poorest of the poor are not losing some of the benefits of and the fact of living in housing development, that the funds are being used appropriately. I have a concern that over the last year, some of the pilot money that we have given to the Housing Authority to take care of infrastructure has actually been used for overtime for policing. And I don't believe we should be paying LAPD time and a half to give services to the poorest of the poor when they should be patrolling it as a regular duty assignment. And so I'd hope that you begin to look at some of those issues to make sure that we are using our housing dollars on housing and the people there are getting those resources, and we should not be paying double for police service that should be coming to you by a right of living in the city of LA. And so these are things that I throw out at you and hope that you work closely with my office and we can begin to discuss these issues. And although people have a tendency to look at the housing developments as housing authority, there's a myriad of properties throughout the city of LA that are housing authority properties, smaller, newer, more well-developed, is which the concept I think Mr. Reyes was talking about is not localizing all of the poor people in one development, then wonder why things don't quite go well. So we'd hope that you carry on that concept, but particularly looking at the financial structure of how monies are being used as relates to housing and whether it's used properly, and again, whether people are getting the adequate city services that they should. But thank you both for putting yourself up for these nominations.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Mr. Rosendahl.
Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
First, I know the Reverend, you've been on the God Squad when we did that, and you really gave texture and spirituality to many people. Tell us about your background. I know a bit about you, but most folks don't.
I've lived in Los Angeles for the last 12 years, which is a little hard to believe. I have served as a pastor of a church, St. Philip's Church in South Central LA, and Councilmember Perry's district. And through that work with that community, was able to see ways for diverse communities to come together, working together on issues that are important to them. I've volunteered on boards that have worked on those kinds of issues, like Coalition LA, which is also committed to community development in diverse and different ethnic and economic groups. I've done a lot of work around workers' issues, especially since I've been here in LA. Before LA, I did a lot of work on HIV and AIDS, and that's the only experience I have in housing directly, is in developing housing in communities for people who were living with HIV and AIDS. I am now currently the pastor of a church in the city of Inglewood. My parish and my parishioners, many of whom live in South LA, continue to be very involved in community issues and other issues, but I don't know, that's a mini version of what I've been keeping busy with.
That's great. Shanna?
I'm an affordable housing developer. I'm part of a small woman and minority-owned company called One Company. I'm also the executive director for a group called WORKS, which is Women Organizing Resources, Knowledge, and Services. And we typically have been developing projects either for ourselves or in conjunction with local nonprofits in various of the council districts to serve those not quite as low as the Housing Authority, but between 50 and 30% of median. And we've been piecing together pots of money to serve those residents and to bring services to them, such as computer programs, which the councilman talked about, and parenting classes and other kinds of things, actually on shoestring budgets.
When you look at the homeless issue, which we have a big one, we're talking about permanent housing with supportive services. The mayor's committing $50 million. Councilwoman Jan Perry's given great leadership on the issue. What will you do specifically when you reflect on that in that role on the Housing Authority?
What I'm probably going to do initially is, like Altagracia said, I'm going to look at what has been laid out before us and to really look at best practices, not only here, but in other locales that I've been in and that I know about, and try to bring some of that knowledge to the discussion, and then hopefully together with the other folks that are directing attention in that area to then move forward to do something that would actually make a difference for the long haul.
Well, what I'm excited about with you is that you have hands-on experience in all of this, and you've put together proposals, ideas with a vision, and you've made it happen. So I know you'll do that with this. Altagracia, the same question, homelessness, $50 million for homeless housing. We believe in permanent housing with supportive services. The mayor's also talking about $1 billion overall project with housing. How will you interact with those challenges?
I first would, I guess, applaud the work of the mayor's office and the city council, because I think it is an issue that if we bring our will to bear, we can solve it, and that really is inexcusable in a society with all of the resources that we have to bear on this very serious issue. I would want to look especially at those supportive services, because that would be the area that I would have the most experience in, ensuring that not only are they made available, but that they're fully funded and that they're accessible to the people that have the greatest need, because sometimes the way that systems are set up to support people are not really very supportive. And so looking to those best practices to ensure that that infrastructure of support is there, which will allow those people to succeed in a housing situation. I don't think it's really that we don't know what needs to be done or that we don't know how to do it. I think what is left to be done is to encourage the private sector and other people who usually don't think of themselves as related to this issue to see how it is that they are connected and how investment in kind of the public infrastructure in terms of people's mental health and food and living needs is something that improves the community and improves their investment in the community. So to get them in as partners in this work as well.
Well, I want to congratulate the two of you for stepping up to the plate. I want to congratulate our mayor for having the wisdom to pick the two of you, and we wish you best of success.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. Ms. Perry is our next speaker.
I wanted to call to the question so we can vote on these two great nominees.
Thank you, Ms. Perry. That's our last speaker. If we can please prepare the roll on the nominations and tabulate the vote.
11 eyes.
Welcome aboard, Commissioners, and congratulations. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you. Our next order of business.
Next item is item number 10, and that was called special by Councilmember Parks.
Okay, Mr. Parks, we have item number 10 before us.
Number 10. I'd like to have staff come up. We were told that that Joya was on her way up from the treasurer's office. Can we hold that, Mr.
Sure,
President,
we can
till
hold
she
that on the
gets
desk. Would you like to go to number 11?
here? Only if Personnel Department is here.
Personnel here for 11? If not, I know we have folks here for 12, so, oh, personnel is here? Okay. Take
Personnel.
up item number 11 then.
Yeah. Colleagues, I just want them to come up and make a brief report. Many of you remember that just before the last budget, we put resources in Personnel Department to assist them in getting all of the positions unfrozen, with the belief that with the new budget and going up and unfreeze, that we needed to make sure the resources were there so departments would not be asking for positions or lists and they not be available. And I'd just like you to give the council just a brief update of what progress we've had and what kind of numbers we have since the beginning of the fiscal year.
Some of the proactive measures that we've taken at the Personnel Department have been to work closely with city departments to identify their critical positions that need to be filled on a critical basis, as well as we've used the master calendar to facilitate our ability to schedule the exams based on that criteria. We've developed a report recently in our certification access system that gives us particular data in regards to certification activity. Just to give you a comparison, the number of certifications that were generated the first quarter of 2004-05 were 277. The first quarter of 25-06, after the freeze was lifted, we generated 734 certs. There were 830 appointments made the first quarter of 04-05, and the first quarter in fiscal year 2005 and 6, there was 1,181 appointments made. We're also going to be providing a quarterly report to the Budget and Finance Committee of the various hiring and statistics for the last 4 quarters, and that will be provided again on a quarterly basis.
Okay. You have any comments?
Well, just as Roxanne stated, my name is Janali Shihata, I'm with the Examining Division of the Personnel Department, and we have been working with the departments in updating. We put the master calendar on the intranet, and we've been working with departments to update that on a weekly basis to ensure that we are meeting the needs of the city as far as which exams we open and when we open them.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to come up and give a thumbnail as to what progress, because I think we're all concerned with freezes over the last 3 years, whether Personnel Department was going to be able to accommodate these numbers of requests. Also, we just had, just for your information, a meeting yesterday, Budget and Finance, and I want you to know that almost all of our departments are staying within budget. They are filling their positions, that they're in line. There's a few that we're going to have Mr. Fujioka go and meet with, but I think in general, the unfreeze has worked. We've gone through probably the longest period of an unfreeze in our recent memory, but the fact that the resources are there in personnel to make the positions available have been of great help. And I just want to say thank you to your department and Maggie for doing that, and that's why we wanted to make sure that you got a head start on the process before the fiscal year. One of the things that will come out, I guess, next week when we have the monthly report from the CAO, we're not thinking about a freeze, but we certainly are going to be talking to departments of slowing down some of their hiring because they are over budget and looking at ways to deal with it. But we hope to get through this year without a freeze, and so that all the money and effort you put in to grease the machinery is not going to come to an abrupt halt. But if there are individual departments that may have some issues, we're going to deal with them as independent concerns. So thank you very much, and certainly we're pleased to see what progress you've made.
We'd also like to thank you and the council for giving us being sensitive to our needs and giving us the resources in order to allow departments to fill these positions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. We have a couple more council members. Why don't you stay at the table just in case they have questions? Mr. Zine, to be followed by Mr. Cardenas.
I thought you tried to slip away real quick. Just a couple questions. The Department of Transportation, we had audits and government efficiency and transportation committee yesterday and discussed that particular department, some of the issues that brought up due to a recent audit from Controller Chick. Their reason was lack of personnel, lack of personnel, lack of personnel. It was a consistent theme with Department of Transportation with a variety of matters that they're responsible for. Can you tell me how many requests that particular department has submitted and how many were granted? Do we have it broken down to that category?
You know, I do have that information, but not readily available with me. I
Okay.
mean, we are able to retrieve that information through the CERT activity report. I'm not aware of any particular concerns or any classes that we're not able to fill. I know, again, by working closely with examining and with the tools that we have in addition to the departments, the goal is to identify these types of critical need areas before the lists even expire.
Well, their concern was that yesterday a testimony is that they were short of personnel, that there was the hiring freeze, and I know we lifted it last July, and the constant theme in this report on the audit was their response was lack of personnel, and I'm trying to now follow up since you're here this morning. Did they actually submit requests to fill positions after the freeze was lifted, and have those positions been filled to remedy the concerns that were generated from the audit?
I know we have certified several lists for Department of Transportation. I just don't know the specifics
Okay,
as far as
if-
the classes, but
If you could let my office know, and because I want
Sure.
to follow up on that, it's going to be brought back to the Transportation Audits Government Efficiency Committee. Councilmember Gruhl, Councilmember Huizar, myself, and Member Rosendahl, we were all there yesterday for that. And this audit, there's still follow-up to be done, but the concern I have is the personnel chair, when the freeze was lifted, there was supposed to be a green light, and the constant theme was, we don't have the bodies, and I'm trying to find out why when the freeze was lifted. So if you can get that to my office, I'd appreciate it.
sure, no
Thank you.
problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zine. Mr. Cardenas, and then Ms. Gruhl is our next two speakers.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the report. One of the things I'd like to ask is, along with this report, do you have the figures of how many employees actually left the city of Los Angeles during that same period of time?
That information will be available on the upcoming report that we're going to, the quarterly report that we're going to be providing.
Okay. Has the population of the city gone up or down during that same period of time?
Oh,
It's gone up.
It's gone up.
It's gone up. Yeah, the city of Los Angeles is still growing. For example, one thing that I'd like to point out is that during this time period of hiring freezes, the city inadvertently, purposefully or not, has put off some infrastructure issues. And we're kind of backlogged more and more when we don't have the personnel to address those kinds of things. And the reason why I bring that up is because what I'd like to ask of you, with the permission of the chair of the Budget Committee, Bernard Parks, and also the Personnel Committee, Mr. Zine, if in the future, whenever we request that we have a report on the hiring of employees, that at the same time, in the same report, that you actually provide with us the same time frame of the attrition rate of people leaving their jobs, be it retirement, injury, whatever it is, reason why there is a vacancy. Because it's really important, if you read the newspaper tomorrow, I would suspect that they're going to talk about this report, if they do, and talk about the hiring going on, and there was a hiring freeze, or was there really, and look at they hired hundreds of people during this time, and make it seem as though we have a bloated government here.
Okay.
Maybe we do, maybe we don't, but I don't think just looking at that part of it would actually explain the story and actually tell an honest 100% story of both sides. There's many sides to this, but one of the things that I think it's only fair to the workers of Los Angeles, the taxpayers of Los Angeles, and the decision makers who've been elected to make these kinds of decisions, meaning us and the mayor, is that when you do give that report, you also give the other backdrop of that is what kind of attrition rate do we have of personnel that we're losing, be it firefighters, police officers, street personnel, people who work in our parks, etc. If you could do that, obviously we'll have to give you time to do that. If we could pull those two together, I think it would only be fair, and it would be a much more holistic report and a much more fair picture to the people of Los Angeles as to what we're trying to do here and the responsibilities that we do have. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gruhl?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just wanted to follow up because I've asked this question when it was an audits committee, when I served on personnel committee, and I think in budget, particularly about the treasurers, because the audits committee had indicated, and I see our actually treasurer there, so she may want to answer this question, is making sure that we have the staff, because we had to use temporary staff for a while, just to get a quick update on the staffing for the treasurer's office, because I know there was a lapse there. But all the last reports have been that you're up to speed. I just want to make sure we're still on track.
Well, thank you, Councilmember. Joya DeFore, City Treasurer. We still are on track. We have had a resignation in one of our new employees and have been working with the Personnel Department to create an open and continual testing for the Treasury Accountant series. We are in the process. We had an employee transfer to DWP as an investment officer, so we lost that person. We are doing interviews this Thursday for Investment Officer 2 position, and shortly thereafter, Investment Officer 1. 2 administrative people will be coming on board April 3rd. We do have 2 employees on indeterminate leave, however, so that we are currently using 1 professional temporary accountant and 2 administrative clerk types until our 2 permanent employees come on board on April 3rd. So we are pretty much up to speed, and we've been working very closely with the Personnel Department. We are also working on a new class. We submitted some final paperwork for the Treasury Analyst Series with some proposed pay grades, and I know that's currently under review by Personnel Department, and they've been talking with our personnel officer.
Okay, so from your perspective, the problems that were identified and relative to the original audit and working with the Personnel Department, those kind of systematic things have been resolved?
I feel they've been resolved at this point.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And always let us know when there are challenges, and I think that's what Mr. Zion was talking about as well. We don't want to be the last to know that there's a problem in filling those positions and our policies not being implemented. And so I think it's critical that these kinds of reports come back to us often enough and let us know so we're not dealing with a crisis situation in certain departments. So appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Rosendahl.
Good morning, ladies. Good morning. Tell me, how many positions are vacant right now that we should fill?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information readily available, but I can get it to you.
But the reason we're sitting here today is to talk about filling those positions and criteria to do it. Do you have any sense of how many positions we're talking about? Okay, while you're looking there, let me ask you this. How many people in our personnel office that we're dealing with are connected? There are 40,000 city employees, correct, roughly?
Right.
Do you deal with all 40,000, meaning police and fire as well as others?
Yes, we do. We have 2 different divisions that administer the examinations. One examining division where I'm from handles all the civilian classes, and then we have a public safety bureau that handles the police and fire promotional. So yes, it would be all of them, but just 2 different
Do you have any
areas.
sense about how many positions we're talking about?
How many?
Open positions that we need to fill now?
No, I don't.
Okay. Okay. Now, when you summarize this report to us, would you do it for our viewers as well as for us here, Council? What did we learn, and what are you submitting today?
Okay. This report addresses the Budget and Finance Committee's inquiries regarding the Personnel Department's efforts to complete testing and establish eligible lists for critical positions in the city, and in reference to examinations requested by the Convention Center and the Treasurer's Office. There are 5 divisions in the Personnel Department that make up the selection team. We work collaboratively with city departments to provide them with eligible lists of qualified candidates to meet their hiring needs and in turn to the staffing necessary to achieve their operational goals. There are over, as you mentioned, 48,000 civil service positions in the city and over 930 job classifications. And we test to create eligible lists for all of these classifications. As over half of these classes have less than 10 positions, it's not necessary to have eligible lists for every class at all times. However, we make it a priority to have eligible lists available for classes that frequently have positions to be filled, or the nature of the work is either critical in providing city services or are revenue generating.
Okay, I'm on the Budget Committee, and I'd love for you to give us a report on the specifics about how many open positions we have, what's the nature of these opening positions, what steps are we taking for outreach, and what steps are we taking for completion. Another issue is all these different classifications. Do we need to have 900 and something? Seems kind of silly to me. Can we look at that and see where they're comparable positions and maybe streamline that process? And then the third is, as we get into our budget deliberations as a city, I want to get a better handle on the 48,000 employees and the benefits and the long-range retirement plans and so on. And I want to discuss the whole issue of the structural deficit. And I'd like to get an appreciation from you guys on that as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to add one thing. Mr. Rosendahl, they're also, in the sense, going to be looking at the issue you brought up at Budget and Finance yesterday of accelerating the ability to hire more LAX police officers, which then cuts down the overtime of LAPD and takes us out of that debate about the 22 officers and things like that. And so Personnel Department, many of us are aware, took over all of the background responsibility for all of our law enforcement agencies or public safety agencies, and so they are the ones that basically are putting that emphasis. So that's one of their priorities, is to deal with that for lists from the LAWA police, also for general services, also dealing with the fire department, but primarily LAWA to get us back to a situation so that we do not have this crossing as it relates to overtime versus personnel resources at the airport.
Mr. Reyes, for the first time, do you follow by Mr. Rosendahl?
I'll follow.
You want to yield to Mr. Rosendahl on that point? Okay.
Yeah. I want to thank you for saying that, Bernard, because it also comes before the Commerce Committee, where LAX is a vital part of the Commerce Committee, and I want to understand, like you do, why we have 22 sworn officers from LAPD at LAX that we don't get reimbursed for in our general treasury. And secondly, I want to understand better the overtime of officers of the LAPD at LAX and what we can do staffing pattern-wise with the LAWA police to get over that hump. Thanks for bringing that up, and I look forward to the Commerce Committee getting those reports as well. Thank you.
Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Council President. I just wanted to rise and, one, thank my colleagues. 3 weeks ago, we supported and passed a motion that would create positions that essentially would allow us to create jobs for youth by peeling away contracts within the Public Works department and unit. And that just passed 3 weeks, so it's very fresh, so it probably hasn't come to you yet. But if we're going to institutionalize our ability to recycle our old city dollars back in the neighborhoods through these jobs, those become very pivotal points. Another element within that motion was to add a line to every department director as an element of assessing the performance. How effective were they in hiring youth into their departments? And that became a criteria by which we are going to evaluate our department heads throughout the city. So again, another step taken by this body to recycle our tax dollars back to our communities by hiring youth. So I just wanted to put that on the table now that you're here. It's a criteria that this body voted for, and again, in hopes that we can provide some resources and a future for our young people through jobs.
I know that at the Personnel Department, we work with various agencies, workforce source centers and so forth, for that sole purpose.
Great, but as long as we know the criteria should be folded into every
Right.
executive in this city's departments, it's a crucial element to make sure they take it serious. It's not just an afterthought or a public relations move, but it's a very viable element of their performance.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rosendahl, did you want to speak again?
One second,
Okay, sure.
to reemphasize what my colleague here has said, we had an apprenticeship program presented to us the other day that will go before Public Works. The key to the young men and women in our city today is education and jobs. And if some of those 48,000 jobs could go to young people and mentoring programs with it, we're going to make a huge dent in our issues in the city. So I look forward to you reporting to both committees on how you're doing outreach for the youth in our city to bring them into apprenticeship programs and into jobs.
Thank you, colleagues. Okay, if we can, if there's nobody else wishing to be heard, prepare the roll on this item and tabulate the vote.
11 eyes.
That is approved. Thank you very much. Are staff here for number 10, Mr. Parks? Or you want us, there? Okay, number 10 is before us.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
With on number 16.
16? Okay, we'll send 16 forthwith.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the things that we in the council have had a great tendency to look at is our debt policy and what our rating is on our debt service and things, but we often ignore the other side of the ledger on how we raise revenue in the city. And just recently, we began to have the treasurer come into the city into the committee to start putting together a monthly report to give you an idea of how we manage several $1 billion of city's resources and how those funds are coming forward. And we thought it'd be important that you see the other half of the ledger of how those funds are dealt with. And one of the things that we found interesting in the committee was that we just very recently actually applied for and received a rating as it relates to how we manage our money. It appears we had not done that or thought about it in the past. But Joy, why don't you give an overview, and in your council file for today are the first or the quarter of last year, the third quarter of last year, of giving what we've done in the city. And these are the revenues we depend on and will be depending on as the budget process begins.
Okay, thank you, Council Member. Joya DeFore, City Treasurer. With me, I have Hank Stern, who's the city's Chief Investment Officer. The Council member is correct. Until 2002, the city did not have a credit rating on its investment pool. The city did obtain in May of 2002 and has maintained ever since then a AAA from Standard & Poor's. I will ask Hank Stern to give us a little details on where we are budget-wise, because I think it's important when we're actually ahead of our projected earnings to let you know. Hank.
Thank you. A little nervous first time. Give you an update. Due to rising interest rates, year-to-date through February, our portfolio earnings are approximately $29 million over our original estimates, and our general fund earnings are approximately $5 million over original estimates. That's through February of 06.
For a second. Could you explain when you make those estimates and then what do you use as a baseline to now determine that we're over them?
Certainly. The estimates are actually made as early as 16 months ahead of end of a fiscal year. So it's using a methodology to try to extrapolate in the future where interest rates are going. That's a really difficult task at times. We do our best practice as far as determining that. We've been very fortunate that due to rising interest rates, we've been able to exceed what our original projections were.
And I might interject that we did provide updated interest projections in September as we saw the interest rates rising in February, and we're in the process of providing yet another updated interest projection, which will show us significantly ahead of our projected earnings.
That's correct. The other aspect we do for revenue is what we call securities lending, and that is an enhancement on the existing investment portfolio. and we are currently exceeding our estimates at this point. We're a little over $600,000 on total earnings on securities lending, which is approximately 2% above what we had projected originally. So we seem to be in very good shape at this point.
Anything else? Let me say thank you for coming and providing the information. I think it's important for the council to know, again, both sides of that ledger. To have that AAA rating is, I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's the highest you can get.
It is the highest you can get, and it's also used by the rating agencies in determining what the city's debt rating is. They use it as a financial management component evaluator.
So it's something in which I think is, just as we applauded the CAO in the sense of debt management and where we are and the debt policies, I think it's also important to know that we are in good shape, and it's almost, to me, almost unreal to believe they're projecting 16 months ahead to give us an idea, but yet they're exceeding even their own expectation. I was concerned when we first brought these reports in is whether we were getting the best management of our portfolio and whether we were making as maximum money as we can. And after the briefing at the committee, it's clear that we're on good footing. And as they've advised, we could do things far more radical and make maybe more money on the short term, but it would not be of the best health and welfare of the city's general fund. And so this is something I think is important for all of us to be aware of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parks. Before you go, we have another...
Not so fast.
We have another council member who'd like to be heard, Mr. Cardenas. And then Mr. Reyes.
Good morning. Thank you very much for that report. I think it's very important for us to go through these boring reports because unfortunately what we don't want to do is assume that everything is going along just fine or not and then find out through some headline in the press like other cities and counties have had over the years. I want to thank you for the good work that you're doing, and the report seems to tell us that things are in good stead. Our rating by the rating agencies. You pointed out that that rating is based on the information, much information on this city, and these rating agencies take into account the information you just disseminated today, correct?
That's correct, Councilmember.
And yet at the same time, if we're inaccurate or we are behind on getting that information out, that could affect our rating, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, because they worry. Well, what's going on over there? Why aren't they giving us the information? What's taking them so long? Maybe it's bad news, and that could affect our ratings. The rating isn't a science, correct? It's, excuse me, I'm an engineer. Economics is not a science, okay? So let's not argue that point. But since it is not a science, these ratings are basically somewhat subjective by these very prestigious rating agencies, right?
That's correct.
So we don't exactly know what, if anything, has affected our rating the most. We can only assume based on what we see the results of those ratings, correct?
I think that's correct.
So the reason why I wanted to point that out is because on one side we have revenue, on one side we have outgoing funds, et cetera, but on the other side, a city like ours, what would you say the average, on your average day, how much we have out in debt to the nearest billion? Several billion dollars, maybe $10 billion, who knows, depending on how many projects we have going on when you break down all the departments. And then if you get into proprietary departments like the Department of Water and Power and the airport, we could have out there $10, $20 billion that the city taxpayers or the people at the airport, the ratepayers there or at DWP are paying. The reason why I want to bring that up is because that's a lot of money. It's a lot of responsibility, a lot of information flying back and forth. And my main question to you right now is, based on our rating, that could affect our obligations and affect our ability to serve the people of Los Angeles to the tune of millions and millions of dollars, correct?
I think so. In discussions with the rating agencies, particularly S&P, since we have that rating, they use the fact even that the investment pool has a rating as a positive component into the city's overall rating. If we were not to do as well or not provide information, that could in fact impact their confidence in the city's even debt side, and could result in a lower rating, which would mean more interest.
Higher rates.
Correct.
Okay. The reason why I wanted to point that out, because this is kind of boring, but unfortunately it's important. astronomically important, because a rating could actually mean the difference between several $millions more or less in our general fund. And our general fund does pay for police officers, it does pay for libraries, it does pay for all of those things that our constituents call us on a daily basis, say, I need this pothole filled. My street hasn't been paved in over 40 years. When are you going to get around to it? Well, all of those things come out of the general fund. And this rating, thank God we have the highest rating available today, that rating does affect our general fund by millions of dollars at the end of the year, correct?
That's my opinion, sir.
Okay, well, it's actually the fact, because when you look at the general fund, when you look at the policy matters that we've been talking about this morning in your report, that is directly related to the general fund.
It is.
So I want to thank you very much for your report and the good job that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cardenas. Mr. Reyes is our next speaker.
I appreciate my colleague's questions. He asked a lot of the questions I would have had. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. That's our last speaker. If we can please prepare the roll on the item and tabulate the vote.
11 eyes.
That item is approved. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next item, please.
Item number 12, called special by Councilmember Padilla.
Mr. Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, would love to call forward the co-chairs of our Joint Commission on LAUSD Governance, David Cunningham and Maria Casillas, just by way of background, and I'd love for them to guide us through a brief sort of presentation and status report. This council, close to a year ago, voted to work together with the school district to appoint a joint commission to look at LAUSD's governance, much like the Charter Reform Commissions did for the city between 1997 and 1999. It was a tall task, a tall order, but they've been up to the challenge. The commission has both had meetings throughout the school district, even beyond just the city of Los Angeles, and heard from experts and academics and stakeholders from throughout Los Angeles and really throughout the country. The resolution that was adopted last year that called for the commission to be created included some key milestones, because we know there was an urgency to act. The commission will have a final report due this June, just a couple of months from now. But we had as a first deadline an initial report, a status report due no later than the end of January, and they indeed met that time frame. We've had a presentation in committee on the report, where they are, some themes that they're focusing in on. It took a little time to schedule my attendance, their attendance, the two of theirs attendance to be here, but before the full city council, wanted to provide them an opportunity to lay out basically not only what they've been doing, but some key themes, some important issues that they seem to be focusing on from here forward, those 7 subject areas that are the topic of the report. And as I turn it over to them, colleagues, I'll call to your attention both the status report, the background document, the compilation of studies and research papers and presentations that have been before the committee, as well as the city attorney's report on a legal analysis for many of these recommendations. So I would ask for your attention as it guides us through a PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you. Councilman Padilla, thank you very much. We really appreciate the support of both you and Councilman Huizar, certainly when you were president of LAUSD. I would just like to take a moment to especially thank Bill Mabee from your staff, who from the beginning has worked very closely with us. The key issue was the need for support to get this done. And Mr. Mabee was always there, and we really appreciate the work that he's done. So I wanted to at least publicly acknowledge his hard work in making this happen. This time I'll turn it over to my co-chair, Maria Casillas.
Yes, and we have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm not sure, I guess you see it on your computer. So we'd like to go very quickly and simply review with you the several salient points about our commission, starting with our mission, which was to consider options for improving LAUSD governance, and the recommendations that we hope to make should give you options at least to consider how best to improve academic achievement, parental involvement, equity, efficiency of operations, accountability, and safety. The commission was formed by your approval on April the 27th and signed by the mayor on April 29th of 2005. There are 30 commissioners. We have held 17 meetings thus far, and at those meetings we have worked with national and local speakers to learn more about the issue, the challenge that we have. The progress report that was completed with the support from the RAND staff was submitted to the council in February of 2006 in committee. And the documents at that time, and which, by the way, are on the website, include a working paper that summarized the options that I will go through very quickly with you. Also, at the time, we submitted the city attorney's legal analysis of the various options that this commission is considering. The final report is due to you in June, so we just have a few weeks, actually, to finish our work. The topics that we've been investigating or probing include the existing governance models that are currently in place throughout the United States and their impact on personnel, on school finance, on student achievement in particular, on parental and community engagement, and most especially on school safety. We've studied the context of the district, the history, and all past reform efforts that we typically label the L's because we've had LAEP, LEARN, Learn, and LAMP, and so many others. You have a listing of national and local experts that we've listened to and had good conversations with, and I'd like to now speak about the 7 broad options that will be before us in the next few weeks for our conversation and deliberation. The first has to do with school board changes, and we will be considering things such as the size of the board, their role, their compensation, their selection methods, etc. There is vast interest across this district and among our commissioners concerning district decentralization. Obviously, as you know, I'm being very, very close to it, the whole issue of Los Angeles mayoral involvement, and probably that is very close to city council involvement in the Los Angeles Unified School District matters. The involvement or the participation by other mayors, other cities in the initiative of mayoral involvement. Collaboration between the cities and the school districts. We've looked at alternative funding mechanisms such as a pupil-weighted formula, and we will be studying further the whole issue of school and student safety changes. We have held 11 community forums. 3 more are in the planning stages. We've been able to hear from parents and community members so that they have an opportunity to comment on the options that I've just gone over, and all of the transcripts of our meetings are shared with the commissioners. You know that you each appointed a member to the commission, so I'm hoping that your representatives are able to bring back information to you upon your request. But certainly David and I are eager to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Perfect timing. Anything else, Mr. Padilla?
Yes, I'm going to press my button again, but just from an overview standpoint, want to just call our attention, colleagues. I know our mayor is in, I believe, New York today, looking at the New York public school system and talking to their mayor. The article in the LA Times yesterday references what's been going on in Chicago. One of the frustrations as we've been going through this process is that the school district or education reform in Los Angeles conversation seems to have been captured only through the lens of mayoral control or not. And as to be blunt, I'm anxious to get to the then what conversation because the legal analysis has shown that if our mayor truly wants to achieve mayoral control of the school district, there will have to be a vote of the people. That would be required because of our charter. And the people of Los Angeles in the school district will either say yes or no. And if they say yes, then what? I think that's what we're all antsy to see as the mayor's unveiling details of his plans. Then what in terms of changes to the governance of the school district? Then what in terms of what it means for teachers, what it means for parents, what it means for students, what it means for the classroom? If the voters of Los Angeles say no, then what? Because the compelling case has been made that status quo is not satisfactory. And if we put our hands together, as we have in the spirit of collaboration via the commission, I believe we can identify a lot of the then what and not have to wait to begin those changes, those reforms, the implementation of a lot of those specific items. So I'll press my button again to speak, but that is sort of the overview of where we are and where the greater civic dialogue is in Los Angeles. Thank you.
May I respond to this?
Yes, please.
The mayor of Los Angeles helped to highlight this issue, and I think shed a lot of light on it. And as a result of that, the 30 stakeholders, of which we're a diverse group, has focused on a number of issues in addition to mayoral control. And if you look at some of the options that we've proposed, one of which decentralization, which is a form of school-based management, and some very operational issues on the school safety side, which has been an issue that has been certainly dear to my heart, and I'm sure to many, many parents. And we've had an opportunity to look at not merely who, but the how. Case in point, on the school safety issue, we had a number of experts come to us from the Sheriff's Department, from LAPD, from the school police, and indicated that within the organizational chart, the school police is buried very low, and there's not direct accountability to the superintendent. They don't attend command staff level, does not attend CompStat meetings, for example. And when you look in the 77th Division, where you have the Safe Passage Program and others, that certainly sharing information and communication is a key part of governance. And we looked at how do you make accountability better on many of those issues. So I would just say one of the great things about having this commission is that we've been able to bring light to the issue of governance and then delve deeply into how we can reform both the how in addition to the who. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Weisar, followed by Mr. Reyes, followed by Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you very much, and before I begin, I also want to thank Mr. Cunningham and Ms. Casillas for the amount of time you put into this effort, and I think it's, a lot of people don't see the long hours you not only put into conducting these meetings, but also all the background work that happens in preparing for these meetings. So thank you so much for your service to the city and to the school district. I also think that when Council President Padilla and I were thinking of appointing our co-chairs for this commission, I appointed Ms. Casillas and Mr. Padilla appointed Mr. Cunningham. We knew it would be a great duo with Mr. Cunningham's background with the city and public safety and Mrs. Casillas' long service at the school district and knowledge about educational issues. It's a great team that we put together to make this possible. We've come a long way, and we have a lot of work to do as well. I think just the process itself has been educational for many of us that have been involved with the school district or not, and I think it's been a good process so far. And as we all know, the tough part's going to come when those recommendations come out, and there's going to be some more heavy lifting that needs to be done, because at that time we're going to decide for ourselves, okay, well, who's going to take this up? Who's going to take the flag to either go to the state to get some state changes, to go to the charter to make those changes there, or advocate at the local school district. But I wanted to make one thing clear as I stand here before the council and the public. I served on the Board of Education for 4.5 years, and I know there needs to be some drastic changes to continue to provide an environment by which we create better policies to raise student achievement. And that's what this Governance Commission is about. I just want to remind everyone that this is about finding ways to raise student achievement. We don't have a governance structure at the district at this time that allows for people, good people, to make the right decisions to move forward and have the best interests of the children in mind. I often bring up the example how I was reelected for a second term on the Board of Education, and how I think I could have done nothing for 4 years and still been reelected. There's no accountability on the board members at this time. Secondly, once we get there, or once I got there, I found that I spent very little precious time on what matters. That is the school site, the classroom, and how do we improve teaching in the classroom. I spent 75% of my time on construction matters. Building schools is a priority, but for the leaders of this district, people who are ultimately responsible for the performance of this district, we needed to focus on what's happening in the classroom, and we saw very little of that. I kind of just went over again some of my experience briefly on the Board of Education to remind us, as someone who's been there for 4.5 years, that there is drastic change that we need to make there. I want to thank not only the chairs and the commissioners, 30-member commission, but this council for stepping up, along with Council President Padilla at that time, who said, let's get involved. We cannot leave this up to continuing the status quo that we have and accepting mediocrity at the district, and really stepping up and doing more. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Weisar. Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the word how and who, because it talks about cutting through the philosophies of policy and how, let me get to the point. Half of my district is in poverty. We've got 93,000 kids out there. We don't know where they're at. They just fell off the face of the earth. They're dropouts. That's the general term that's been used. And my question to you is, in your discussion, were you able to, or are you going to talk about the conditions these kids are living in, the poverty that affects their ability to learn? When we talk about performance, it's not just about the policy at the school board level. It's not just about how we manage the resources. It's about how we connect with the city and the county on the health issues, on the issues of that young child living with a single parent, abused families, families who don't speak English. I mean, these are very real environments that affect the ability to learn. Were you able to draw some links or look at how this city can work with the school district in relation to those real issues that directly affects the kids' ability to learn? Were we able to drill down to that point? Can you hold my time, please?
We did discuss some of that when it comes to the area of partnerships and collaboration, because of course, as you know, the mission of the school district is to educate. They receive a per pupil allocation for funding to educate, to hire teachers. About 80% of their monies are labor intensive, or if not higher, probably higher from what we've learned. So the whole idea is, how do we put these two major institutions to work together and create viable partnerships that, absent all of the restrictions that you currently have on the use of resources and that they currently have, how might they come about to better support learning? We call those areas learning supports. I know that there is much interest in that. The parameters of our mission, however, is around governance issues, hoping that we can impact these things. But I would like to, Mr. Reyes, if I said that our commission would be able to probe the ills of poverty, since that in a one-year commission's time, we were really not set out to do. However, having said all of that, I think what is unique about this commission, and certainly the fact that the City Council has created it, is that in a very formal way, this wonderful city of Los Angeles has understood now that the school district cannot continue on its own and expect to get results. Cannot do it on its own. And I hope, regardless of which of these options, or all of them or none of them take place, that this council will never forget its mission to the children and families of this district. Because I was in the school district for 20 years, as somebody has already mentioned. I spent my youth trying to, go after windmills as well. And I've come to the conclusion that if we really are to invent ourselves as the village for these children and for our families, we need to work together. There's a lot of politics around this particular issue of governance and about school improvement. There are some that would see the glass half full and the glass half empty. But for your families, the kids that you sent to Belmont High School and others, it is a story of misery and pain if they do not get an education. And I think that for the most part, most of our commissioners are very well aware of that. And I hope again that we garner your support and your guidance, because we are not all powerful people that have all the intelligence or all the capacity. So we certainly need you to take the moment in June or July, when the moment will be yours, to do something and to act on it. Thank you.
I just saw the movie Blowout. 1969, we had the walkouts from Lincoln High School. And what the kids were describing then are the same issues that I hear from the kids today and from their parents. The issue of communication breakdown, teachers not connecting. Even though they are of the same color, even though they come from the same neighborhoods, you have the basic disconnect of how kids are responding to teachers and the ability to learn. So you would assume, because many of us came from those days in which we were given a second chance, we were able to go to the CETA program, the CYOs, the NYCs, and get an education, and now we're back in points of authority. So for me, I was with a heavy heart at the end of the movie, thinking of how some parents come to my office and talk about how the kids get out of the campus because there's a big hole in the fence that they won't fix. How the teachers are essentially just berating the kids and not teaching them, they're babysitting them. How they have to fight for a desk. How they have to use books and pass them on. Not much has changed today. So my point here today is when we talk about these silos, these institutions, how separate they are, if we can get past the politics of it and talk about, if we're going to look at block grant programs, why aren't we targeting the kids who have an ability to go to school, offer them the kind of block grant services instead of just dumping it out to the park system with no connection to the school? I mean, there's relationships here that are very real geographically. And my last point, and I'll stop after this, is that this city has implemented its resources based on geography. Our formulas and how we apply our street services, our education services, is based on geographic size. It has nothing to do with people. It has nothing to do with density. It has nothing to do about how we keep our streets clean. So there's a very basic notion here, colleagues. When we look at our own resources, what we need to change, and how we focus on resources in order to create these collaborative efforts. So I'm run out of time, but I appreciate your hard work.
Well,
I'm not speaking down to what you've done,
No,
just
we-
that there's
we
a certain
understand.
frustration. When you see what's happening today, not much has changed since 1969.
And you might want to know that as we look at weighted student formula, you may want to consider some of that yourself. Because if you are just using numbers to allocate resources, what we're looking at both numbers and need, and whether or not it's equitable to allocate resources just on numbers or both on numbers and needs. So I'm sure if you studied that a little further, it might apply to your decision-making. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And, Councilmember Reyes, when you're saying the conditions are the same, former Board President Huizar, Councilmember Huizar was saying in some ways they're even worse, the conditions. If you look at the number of kids that are packed into individual schools and stuff, some of it is even more of a tinderbox than back then in many ways. While some of the civil rights issues may be less pronounced, certainly just the basic school education equity is probably as powerful as it's ever been, which contextualizes what we're doing here, colleagues. And I want to thank both of our co-chairs for navigating among the choppiest waters in Los Angeles right now. You guys are both on a speedboat that is being rocked from every which way, and you've, I think, kept your eyes focused on what we've asked you to do, but also asked us to help navigate and to guide with you those waters. And colleagues, I would just say that hear these words now. This may be kind of a note or a receive and file issue that we kind of vaguely talking about a little bit. When this comes to us in July, we as a body need to speak. And if we don't do our homework now and start doing that thinking about what our own vision is for education here in Los Angeles, we're going to be playing defense, and we're going to be behind a debate that is defined by others. So I would really just say, in capacity as Council President, spend your time doing that homework as much as we can. Because I think if we can come here informed in July, if we can work through each one of the appointees that we've appointed right now, we can come that much stronger and that much more focused. I would just say, I really want to thank both Councilmember Padilla and Councilmember Huizar for putting this forward and this vision and allowing us to be a part of it as a city council, the mayor, and the school board. And since then, Marlene Cantor, who's now the president of the school board, and Mr. Huizar and Mr. Padilla and I have sat down with our co-chairs as well here to try to find some common principles that can guide this conversation and move it forward. And that the two areas I would divide those into, as I've been thinking, and since we last met, as we kind of think through some of these principles, to do this out loud and openly, is to really look at the governance issues, specifically how we can have more accountable governance. And I think there are a whole bunch of issues that are along the lines of that. More sustainable governance, because right now it's not set up to sustain governance. If you have good governance, it doesn't necessarily go forward. More focused governance, so as Mr. Huizar said, it's not spending too much time on things it shouldn't be, and it can spend the time on the things that it should be. And then lastly, more local governance. That was something in our conversation that just comes up in every single community. Once you get to the neighborhood level, as long as you don't frame it in the ways that we do as politicians at the top, where you're for breaking up LAUSD or keeping it whole, you're for charters, against them, when you get down to just tell us as a parent, what do you want, they say more control locally. And I think that is a universal, even if it's not articulated with the political prisms that we impose upon that. Secondly, the area where the city and the school district can really make an impact, and where I think this commission can, is on the issues of collaboration. Specifically, the idea of whether we do a collaborative authority on school construction. Secondly, on maybe some sort of after-school compact between the city and the school district in the following areas. Everything from maybe the Dial-A-Teacher program people are talking about that would be based here in City Hall and help funded from city funds. Our after-school programs, and ensuring that there isn't a school that doesn't have a good measure of an after-school program that can be set as a goal and something that the city can really do, because I know each one of you as council members do that in schools in your district right now. And then lastly, you know, what Mr. I think, oh no, I'm sorry, before I get to that, also the idea of a mentorship partnership and some of the ideas that I know we fund through city funds right now, the school district funds, but we don't necessarily collaborate on. Continuing with collaboration, the third point, the joint use stuff, and Mr. Reyes started a great project which after redistricting I inherited, and both of us have tried to go through that excruciating conversation, which I know you're launching again, Mr. Reyes, which Ms. Goldberg has gone through. It is so difficult to try to get this in law and make it happen, and yet if we can, we build a better city and we plan a better city around it. And then lastly, looking at higher ed and workforce issues. Those are, I think, all places that are ripe for collaboration, where if we can take this governance commission and actually make agreements on that, then the debate about who is controlling the school district is less important than the content that we are producing. And the mayor has opened up a wonderful space for all of us in this conversation by talking about how governance should occur. And that's a very important question, but in the meantime, let's fill up that space with all the content that will affect and improve our children's lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcetti. I'm next on the speaker queue, but I will go ahead and acknowledge Mr. Cardenas.
Thank you very much. This issue is very important to my constituents and equally important to my 3 constituents who live with me and my wife Norma, who go to public schools, LAUSD schools. And I'm very proud to say that myself and my 10 brothers and sisters all attended LAUSD with the litany of issues and problems that still have yet to be addressed. Thank God some of them have been addressed. But one of the things that I think this governance issue really needs to look at and also basically inform our constituents about, and I want to have a little bit of that dialogue right now, and that is that it is a very complicated matter, this school district of Los Angeles. Matter of fact, all school districts in the state of California, it's my understanding, the state of California does not allow us in California to elect full-time school board members, meaning that they can't get paid, I think, over $24,000 a year or something like that. So henceforth, meaning that they cannot be full-time. How can you expect somebody to be a member of seven-member board with the second largest district in the country, over 700,000 students, and expect somebody on $24,000 a year, have them come to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, address the issues, meet with staff, meet with parents, go to school sites, and all of those kinds of things? To me, that's one of the issues that needs to be addressed. Do we or do we not believe that those elected officials should have that kind of authority and opportunity to give it that kind of attention? Is that not the case? Are we limited by how much a school board member can get paid by the state of California? My time, please.
I think we have the city attorney who has researched all these options. I would
Be more
prefer
than
that
happy
Valerie
to
speak.
hear from that city attorney.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Valerie Flores. I'm an assistant city attorney assigned currently to staff the commission. You are correct. Currently, state law does provide that the maximum amount of compensation per year for the elected board members is $24,000.
$2,000 a month, would it break down?
Correct, if they attend all of the board meetings.
And that's in the state education code, correct?
Yes, and we do have a provision in our city charter which discusses compensation but defers to state law. So in order to change compensation, state law currently would have to change.
Or we'd have to change our city charter?
Yes,
Or both?
although it's unclear, yes. We've recommended that if you want to have a change and have it be most defensible, you change and harmonize both the city charter and state law.
So they
If you
can
do one
correct.
or the other, you're going to draw a legal challenge.
But either way, very likely that would come to a vote of the people, or we?
Yes, any charter change would have to be submitted to a vote of not just the city residents, but all the residents of the
entire district.
district. Correct.
See, you just pointed out another fact of the matter is, people call it Los Angeles Unified School District. Those boundary lines do not conform with the county of Los Angeles. Those boundary lines do not conform with the city of Los Angeles. Therefore, there are a lot of other stakeholders besides the people of Los Angeles and the children of Los Angeles. Thank you for that clarification. Also, I'm not done yet. Another thing that we need to look at, in my opinion, is each board member today represents approximately 650,000 constituents. That's a lot of people on a part-time basis. That's a lot of people to have responsibility to respond to on a part-time basis. That's a lot of people that do deserve to have someone's full, undivided attention on this matter. Every politician, I would contend that every American at one time or other in their life say that our children are our future. Well, I think it's important that this commission, and I thank this commission for devoting your free time to making sure that these issues do come about and that we do put it forth before the people of the greater community of Los Angeles so that everybody understands how complicated it is. But I say the word complicated, not that it's insurmountable to make proper changes and move forward on the governance of our children's school district. I think it's important for us to recognize that our work is only beginning when this commission actually provides for us this report and many other documents and information that you will forward to us as decision makers, both the City of Los Angeles and all of the cities that are involved here, for the County of Los Angeles, and for the state legislature, and eventually the governor as well. So I think it's very important for people to recognize that this is not some kind of blue ribbon commission. This is not the kind of commission where we're going to have a report and just sit on it and say, wow, wasn't that fun in 2005 and 6 when we had this nice commission with some very intelligent people and they talked and put out some paper. I think it's incumbent upon us to take this document as seriously as possible and advance these responsibilities and ideas into some culmination of change for the sake of the children of Los Angeles.
Thank you, Mr. Cardenas. Our next speaker is Ms., please respond, then Ms. Gruhl will be our next speaker after that.
Councilman, thank you very much for going to the heart of the issue. One of the things that we started in reviewing is that the governance structure for LAUSD date back to the 1920s. And I would defy you to drive a Model T Ford around the freeways in Los Angeles of the 21st century. One of the most important issues that I think is shared among all the stakeholders in this is the need for change, because the current mode is very much outdated, and appreciate your recognizing that from our perspective, is what this is all about. Without question, the current governance system mandates a change.
Thank you. Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you, Mr. President, and a special acknowledgement to Councilmember Padilla and Councilmember Huizar for their vision in having this commission be established and to talk about an issue that is critically important to everyone in the city and in our districts. I often speak about a couple of experiences I had when I was running for office and talked to people at their doors, and they wanted to talk about education and they wanted to talk about their schools. And in one part of my district, a parent told me I paid $50,000, someone told me recently $100,000 more for their home because they lived within Carpenter Avenue Elementary School. If you look at a Sunday newspaper and see in the home section and people advertising how they're going to sell their home, included in the ad is Carpenter Avenue Elementary School. And so it is permeates all of what we do in the city of Los Angeles. The schools are not just an island, they are part of our community. And I go back to my experience working for Tom Bradley and the creation of LA's Best, when the school district told us, no, we do not want to participate in the program, even though we were paying for the program and just using their site, and that it was a community center. I think Mr. Garcetti mentioned it, the importance of local control. if we hear anything, I've gone to all of my schools in my district and sat down with the principals and talked to them about how we can work together. And when you sit down and talk to parents, and tomorrow morning I'm meeting with parents from Carpenter Elementary School about traffic around their school and safety issues. But this is not coming from a broader mandate in the school district. It is much more relationships. And I think what we are looking for when you look at the governance structure is the recognition of the relationship between the City of Los Angeles and the school district. That it is no longer the day in which we are two separate entities that shall never meet and that have, don't have common interests. In fact, we do, and we can talk about the economies and the future of the city and the fact that we need to have kids who can read and write and compete in this current market. But it is about how we interrelate with the school board and the entire city. Now, I did a Tom LeBonge asked a question of people and asked them to raise their hand in a meeting recently and asked them how many of them knew who their school board member were. And this was in an affluent area. One person raised their hand in 100. And that, again, speaks volumes about the relationship between our school district and the community. They come to us more often than not as city council members to ask us to help solve a problem because they feel disconnected from the school district. And again, it's a variety of reasons. I mean, 7 school board members, a huge, the budget is larger than the City of Los Angeles's budget here. But the importance of governance cannot be minimized as to how they relate to those communities and to be able to have that local control. We're seeing in parts of my districts the parents coming back. But I think as we look at governance, and I'm almost finishing my time here, one of the things I want to have you talk about, and I've spoken to my appointee about the importance of this, Tyree Weeder, which is the principals and their relationship to the governance of the school district and how that works. Because I can tell you, going to a school, whether it is a successful school or not, based on my meeting with that principal, because the principal either has control, an understanding, and a passion, and an acknowledgement of the relationship between the city and the school district, or it doesn't. And so I think as you look at the governance structure, it's important to not only look at the board, but to look at the next steps in that governance structure, because those principles can make or break a school. And I think that as we talk about this, and people have asked me, what's your position, mayoral control or not mayoral control? I'm kind of where Mr. Padilla is, which is I think everything should be on the table about improving our schools, and that we should look at every type of governance that exists across the country. We need to demonstrate what's going to change when we look at each of those. And I think the mayor has brought up for us an opportunity that it's on the front pages every single day about what's the future of our schools. And so I just want to thank both of you and many of the other appointees who have participated in this, and look forward to further dialogue and exposure to our community and our parents in discussion. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I would like to respond just
Please.
very quickly, Ms. Rule, because I think you do hit at some of the heart of this matter when you use the example of the school principal, because in a highly centralized system as we currently have, the school principal is awaiting the memo or the email that tells him or her what to do. And you have a very high-stakes accountability system that if you don't reach your targets in terms of student performance, on down the line, your job may be on the line, the school might close. I think you read in the paper that 7 schools in the county were just recently taken over. And so school principals are sort of being nurtured not to be the risk takers that they might have been years and years ago. There are always good and innovative principals. Many of them don't know the rules, and I think as when I was a principal, I really didn't know the rules. I did what made sense, and I think I was a successful person. But that's the issue. Local relationships and local control versus a decentralized or a centralized form of governance that is highly, highly restrictive. So we've got to be able to do both, hold people accountable, meet some very, very high standards, national standards, state standards, city standards, but still allow people to figure out how to get there with quality and accountability embedded in their action. And I know my grandson goes to Colfax Elementary School.
It's
It's a
where my
Title I
son's-
school. Yes,
is
but
gonna
it's
go.
a high-achieving school. And I think the key is there, you have a principal who's a risk taker, is always looking for things to do, and always engaging parents. And that's key. That's a key thing.
And that's a prime example, sorry, I just add to this, that Colfax Elementary School, where a new principal came in the last, I think, 5 years,
Yes.
and she has dramatically changed that school by involving parents and the community, and it's critically important.
And your kids are there?
He's not, he's 2.5.
Oh, 2.5,
So
okay.
In a few more years, I told her she
I'll
cannot
tell you about the
leave.
kindergarten teacher.
She cannot leave that Colfax Elementary School, our wonderful principal. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Parks is next, then Mr. Rosendahl, and then for a second time, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Reyes, and Mr. Huizar.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the two presidents for putting this commission together. And I can remember like it was yesterday, although it wasn't, that we were all at the news conference talking about this, I believe in front of your school that you graduated. And I just want to say, as far as my perception on this issue, is that I think it gets too simplified if people get on the debate of mayoral control or none. It is such a complex issue that the end result is whether kids are being educated and do they graduate. And if we don't achieve that, then nothing else matters. We can have the greatest looking schools, we can have new textbooks, but if they don't graduate, they're not educated, the system has failed. Having been in law enforcement for 38 years, we saw the end result of the failures of every system in society. And the thing that is important to me, and because it impacts the 8th District so much, is that 60% of the people in state prison are illiterate. So that should tell us that there's a connection as to the lack of education, the refusal to be educated, or some other aspect of why education has not been achieved. We also know that when these convicts come back in the community, 80% of them go back to prison. So it's clear nothing happens in prison to stop that cycle, and there's nothing for them to catch up once they get back in the community. I unfortunately have a district that not one school is at citywide average on the API scores, and unfortunately, one of our main high schools was just decertified and now is on probation. That is not a good track record when we also know that we lead the city in loss of jobs over the last 10 years. The issue of poverty is at the high level, that we also know that the highest level of violence is in that immediate area, and it's one of the highest crime rates. So all that cycle is going on as it relates to young people living and then trying to get to school, trying to achieve. And then you have the ultimate insult that once they graduate, often it's viewed that their scores don't matter because they don't match up when they go and take the test. So a B at Crenshaw may not be a B citywide. And so these are the things that we're concerned with. When I periodically click around the channel and look at the board meetings for the Unified School District, you don't get a sense that education is on the top of the agenda. There's a myriad of things that are discussed, but you get very little sense that the issues of how kids matriculate through the school system and become successful is on the top of the agenda. I'm concerned that as we talk about how it's politicized, is the lack of sustained, substantive programming that we know that will take us through the years of getting young people through the system. And I know what the end result is if they don't go through the system. And so those are the things that I'm concerned with, is how do we create a sustained program? How do we ensure that there's accountability? But also, when you talk from students to principals to administrators, nobody knows who's in charge of the school district. And everybody that says there's tons of people that overrule them, and the next election could take us on a sweeping transition to go in another direction, and all of the achievements or issues that were in place go by the wayside. So I would hope that we look at it in a much broader sense than just this currently the soundbite that says you're for mayoral control or not, but go backwards and figure out how do we get kids through the system and how do we get their achievement rates and their graduation rates up. And although we celebrate the schools that win the academic decathlon, that's only a dozen kids out of 800,000. Where are the rest of them? And we can debate whether it's 50% dropout or 35%. they're still bad, either one of them. And so, again, if we don't go backwards and say how many kids get through the door, how many of them have an opportunity to be successful, that achievement does matter, then all of the other things are meaningless. So I appreciate both of your efforts and hope that as we move forward, we can actually begin to address and attack the real issues of the lack of education and a variety of other things. And it's unfortunate, 50 years after Brown versus Board of Education, we still have unequal and poor education in this community, in this city, and in some instances in the country.
Thank you. Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to say good morning, champ. And that's to the parents and the teachers that have really made a difference, no matter what we say about the future. Morning, champ. And I say that every morning. I've been dealing with Beethoven Elementary School, Walgrove Elementary School, Mark Twain Middle School, and Venice High School. It is literally in my neighborhood. And the champ, as far as I'm concerned, is my next-door neighbor who has 3 little boys that go to the elementary school, who's grabbed on to that school and is sending her kids there, and the principal of that school that has done remarkably well. So that is the decentralization, that is community control, parents and teachers working closely together. But let me throw out a few questions for you all. We all saw the LA Times this morning. There it is, our mayor and the mayor of New York, and we're calling ourselves a bi-coastal learning curve. You have 7 recommendations in your report, and one of them has to do with the mayor's control. Full Los Angeles mayor control, hybrid, partial Los Angeles mayor control, Los Angeles Mayor Association. I'd like the two of you to reflect on the notion of mayor control, if it makes sense, and if it does, what kind of sense would you like to see it go forward with?
Oh, I'm going to let David take this one first.
Boy, that's a tough one. Obviously, governance has to be driven by accountability, and it has to be driven by politics on some level, because those that are going to make the policy are either going to be appointed or they're going to be elected. One thing that's clear is that the current system needs significant modification. From my perspective, I started out not at all in the column of mayoral control because I thought that it denied basic voting rights to people within the county who did live in the city of Los Angeles. So that was really my concern, because at the end of the day, one of the players sitting at this table with all of us is the general public, including people who don't live in the city of Los Angeles. But I have to confess that in the process, I moved from that position to the real question of accountability and how do you make it more accountable. I think at the end of the day, I have not decided one way or the other how I feel about mayoral control, but I don't think that that's the critical issue. I think the critical issue is how can we modify the current structure, even on the administrative level, so that you can enhance academic achievement. I do believe that ultimately, as Councilman Parks has pointed out, and many of you have also pointed out, that's really what this is about. So for me, I kind of see the mayoral control issue as what brings the light to the table, but at the end of the day, we need to address what the public wants. I think we're attempting to do that. And one thing that, in fairness to the current board, one thing that they've done a tremendous job on is the overcrowding issue. And you look at Measure Y, the public gets it. The public was asked, do you want to tax yourself? Because you asked them, do you want to tax yourself for more police? Came real close, but didn't get enough. On Measure Y, the question is, do you want to build more schools? Unequivocally, yes. So the overcrowding issue, how to have more room for the current students that we have, those to us, I think, are the issues. And so you see 7 options. Mayoral control is 1/7 of the discussion for us.
I think our struggle is with what involvement is really about, and while we do read and we do hear and even maybe have conversation with the mayor's office about what they're thinking, we really haven't seen a plan. And I think the devil is in the details. Mayoral involvement, you know, the way it was in the paper yesterday might be appointing a superintendent not appointing the board, but I don't know what it might be tomorrow. All of those have implications in terms of legislation, whether it's at the state level, at the city level, or both, and really the whole unified school district. The interesting thing is that when we have had public hearings, the overwhelming majority of people speak against mayoral control, but they also speak with a lot of frustration about what's going on. So I think what it is that the mayor is trying to make sure that this gets resolved, this issue of education. We know, for example, 73% of the population in today's school district is Latino. And by the year 2020, 78% of the workforce will be Latino. So the kids who are starting the school district now will turn this city on its heels if we don't do something about it. I think that's what you're struggling with as civic leaders and what the mayor is struggling with. We also are struggling with the whole issue of, you know, I see, I'm not a member of the city family, even though I'm here often, but you have a bureaucracy too. This is a huge institution that you attempt to govern as well. And I'm not sure whether you put one bureaucracy and marry it with another one, whether you just get more bureaucracy or more streamlined bureaucracy. And so what I'm saying is you need to really think through what it means to have involvement, because it involves you, the city council, not just the mayor. So when I think about mayoral involvement, I think some of the answers to your question lie in your own involvement. What does it mean by law if we have such a thing? What does it mean in terms of the way you allocate resources, the way you govern city recs and parks or other things? So it's not a simple matter. It's a very, very complex issue. But we have to do something because our schools are too big, our classrooms are too big, we don't have relationships, and a good thriving city and a good economy depends on the ability of its workforce to have a relationship out there with a vision for Los Angeles that is bigger than what it currently is.
Staying with you, would you decentralize the school system?
Absolutely.
Would you break it up? And how small of pieces would you make?
I wouldn't try to break it up because every attempt to do so has failed and there are so many, but I would attempt to certainly decentralize it. I would say to you today, we could decentralize it if there was a political will to do so on the board.
Hold my time.
That we don't need a special legislation. I think we have had attempts to do so, but we didn't have, I think, two things that were really important and are really important for decentralization. One is you have an accountability system. Even with its flaws, you have one today. We didn't have one 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when Lamp and Learn were around. So everybody is going to be measured by student performance, and we know that. The other thing that we're getting closer to now, and we'll have in the next, I think, year, is a very transparent way to document and to observe how schools spend their money and how the district spends its money. We have the technology in place, but we have systems that don't talk to each other right now. The district is undergoing a massive integration of its financial resources capacity so that a school could actually say, from the 25 budgets that I have, I need to spend $50,000 on books. With a push of one button, could probably find out how many of these accounts are able to spend to allow for book spending, see? So we didn't have that before. I think with those two things, things will begin to change, and we can have decentralization. But you can't decentralize by just simply saying to teachers and parents, you're going to be involved in decision-making if the decision-making is not about substantive issues. And substantive issues, based on what we have learned, have to do with resources and have to do with personnel. And if you can't hire and fire, and if you can't decide how best to spend your resources, then you're just another person that the system has hired to stand there for a while until the next guy comes in.
Right. Your opinion of it? Decentralization?
I think school-based management is a good thing. I don't think that breakup ultimately serves the economy of scales that you get from the organization of LAUSD being as large as it is. One of the lessons that I've learned in the process of speaking to the number of experts that have come forward, the idea of breakup, the idea of having multiple school districts, the problem with it is you don't benefit from the economies of scale. So on the one hand, you want to move closer to school-based management, closer to local control on certain core decisions. But where there is an economy of scale, and there clearly is one, the importance of maintaining LAUSD as a current system that embraces smaller cities, that allows for distribution of assets, because let's put it on the table. Much of what we're talking about when we talk about education is the redistribution of assets from the very wealthy to those who are seeking opportunity. That's part of what the construction program is about. We are asking people who have the money to pay the tax so that we can educate everyone's children. To me, that's what the focus is about. And if you can get the mayor to get everyone on board throughout LAUSD to join it, that's a good thing. But at the end of the day, to me, that's what this is about. It's a redistribution of assets for the benefit of children who need the education but may not have the resources from their parents to make it happen.
You know, in my district, the 11th district, historically, there was the white flight to the private schools. So there's no new schools being built in my district. However, the community are taking over the schools. Each one of the schools, and it's a ethnic diversity of community, and they're taking over the schools. One thing I think the public doesn't understand is that the school board, there's 7 members, and my colleague Jose Huizar was president of the school board. They make $24,000 a year, okay? $24,000 a year. They have practically no staff, and they sit on top of a huge bureaucracy, and they're dealing with billions of dollars. So be it the mayor that takes it over or the school board stays in charge, they have to be more empowered. We at the council here, honestly, we have a budget where we're allowed to have a staff that actually does work in the district. The school board members, you either got to be rich or you got to be a part-timer with another full-time job. How can you focus on such a large operation where you're underpaid and it isn't a full-time job? I'm not suggesting we keep the school board, but what I'm saying is when we look at the governance, we have to look at the resource given to the people who are in charge of governance so that they can be more effective in the job. I might add, as a candidate, the #1 issue of young parents was the local schools that they wanted to take over and be involved in. I agree with the mayor's frustration. It is a disaster for our school system to be having so many dropouts and such a situation that we presently have. So whatever we do in this discussion, hopefully it'll be a better day. Thank you both for your thoughtful comments. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. Next, we have Mr. Reyes, to be followed by Mr. Huizar and Mr. Padilla.
Thank you, Council President. As we go through this discussion, one of the key discretionary points we have as a council is our planning police powers, how we control our land use. I probably go through 15 or 25 cases a week of various development projects. The other week, we had a school board rep talk about a development of a school site in District 15. Now, District 15 personnel, they're frustrated because there was no discussion as to what they wanted to do versus what the council wanted to do. And ultimately, you have eminent domain powers from the state, from the school board, that can basically just pat us on the head and say, okay, sure, you're right. But as a state, we have eminent domain. We are a higher jurisdiction. Thank you for your plans, but we need to build a school, and we're going to do it. Now, you have low-hanging fruit that's already been taken. What's left now are residential zones that are heavily populated in districts with very poor communities who are now being targeted, I believe, for the next school site without consideration of what's going to happen to the people there. I have rail yards, industrial zones along the river. We have this master plan. We should be looking at mixed use. We should be looking at schools with housing, with retail, with jobs. But because of time frames and pressure by the funding sources, they need to move on this, and we're going to lose incredible opportunities. In your governance discussion, did the element of land use and how we shape the surface of our streets, our neighborhoods, and reform the character of neighborhoods, was that put into any of your dialogue?
We
Before
will.
my time.
Mr. Reyes, we will be doing, as you know, in one of the mission statements has to do, or an element of the mission statement has to do with facilities use and joint planning. And so when you get our final report, we will speak to that point more fully. Yes, sir. We are very aware of that. We're also very aware that schools ought to be built as neighborhood schools, and that we ought to get the full benefit of the use of the facilities for after-school hours, so that we'll never have that conversation that Ms. Gruhl talked about. And, for example, at Belmont High School, we have about 5,500 kids there. They will be downsizing. The interesting thing is that they may also be losing enrollment because it is so expensive to live around this city here. Boyle Heights is undergoing some massive gentrification efforts. So, you know, we have to stay on top of it, not based on the census from 2000, but the census that's coming up in 2010 somehow.
Yes, and from my point of view, what's the budget of the school, and what's the budget of the construction program?
Well, the construction program over time is $19 billion, I think, Mr. Wisari. It's $19 billion.
$19 billion just for the school?
Just for school construction.
Okay.
Modernization and school
Okay,
construction.
so $19 billion just for that dynamic. Then you have another budget that actually
Probably
operates the school.
Probably general funds is about $6 billion. Maybe with Title I and everything else, you add another so about 10, 11 billion?
So of the $19 billion of construction, my question to you, and I would hope you can put this in your analysis as you go through the governance, is how much of those $19 billion, which companies, which contractors, which people are being hired that are taking advantage of these $19 billion? I have folks in my district, they see the construction just on the other side of the street. None of the folks there that are working on those sites live in my district. We've built close to 3 high schools, I don't know, I think 2 or 3 primary centers. And when I have a community meeting, the abuelitas, the señoras, we talk about all the improvements, and they say, you know, Councilman, this is all great, but it's not for us. It's not for us. Because not only am I being pushed out of my apartment, but we can't even get jobs around here. And you have all these jobs out there. Who decided which people should get these jobs? So, excuse me, I'm going through a cough here, but those are critical, I think, governance issues and how we recycle again our dollars back in our communities, and who has access to these contracts. And that's the veil we need to strip away and look at it clearly and put it there black and white, because we're going to talk about mayoral control or governance structure. Ultimately, it's what happens in our streets and our homes and how these businesses are being generated and who benefits and who doesn't. And I would love to see an audit of some type to figure out which contractors came from, you know, Middle America, you know, North Dakota, Iowa, Oregon, Orange County. I mean, who's really benefiting from these contracts and who's making those decisions? Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Actually, Mr. Zine for the first time, and then Mr. Huizar and Mr. Padilla, if nobody else for the first time. Mr. Zine?
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple questions. Thank you for your patience. The school district, the San Fernando Valley, charter schools, did you get into the charter environment at all? And I know that in my district, there's a Parkman Junior High and Middle School, which they want to turn charter. There seems to be some resistance. What did you find in that endeavor where it comes to those schools that want to break off? And apparently, at least at Parkman, the teachers have formed an alliance to try and pressure the school board to say, let us go charter. What did you find in that arena with the charter environment, with the teachers and the community?
Well, the charters are probably the most drastic example, if you will, about breakaway and also of local control. So there is a growing interest in charter schools, and they are growing, and the school district is having to cope with allowing more charters. I think just 2 weeks ago they approved various charters for Jefferson High School. So I think that they are moving more favorably in that direction. The school district is also thinking about zones of choice so that there will be autonomies within some areas, probably geographic areas, but all of that is subject to approval and negotiation with the teachers' union.
Because apparently, at least at Parkman, the teachers from the school and the parents have gotten together. And
they initiate the charter.
Exactly.
They need to
and
initiate
they're saying
the
that we
charter.
want to break away from the bureaucracy, and it's a huge school in my district just north of the freeway. And the scores have been good there, but I guess they want to make them better. The other question I have is that something about security, where the police, school police, working with the administration, I've heard some concerns about the lack of cooperation, the lack of support. Did you find that at all in your report?
Go ahead.
Well,
Former police commissioner.
Yes.
You know all about that kind of stuff.
well, certainly we know who to ask. And one of the things in the process, we've had people, including someone from Sheriff Baca's office, Chief Bratton, and specifically Assistant Chief George Gascon. And we've had some detailed discussions on the operational side about school safety. And some interesting things came to light that are critical for governance. Part of it has to do with information sharing. Part of it has to do with elevating the school police to a level where there's direct reporting to the school superintendent. That accomplishes a couple of things. I think it empowers the school police. It allows them to attend, certainly from a command staff level person, to attend CompStat meetings where there are discussions about where are the hot spots, where is crime taking place, where there's certain dangers, to coordinate with this concept of what was happening in the 77th Division of what's called safe passages. Those are some of the school safety issues that we have analyzed, discussed, that can be changed irrespective of the question of mayoral control. The other debate that we've had, and if you look in our report, we talk about the possibility of merger and what that means. But at the end of the day, there is validity in having a unified vision. There's validity in having high-level accountability. And as it stands right now, as we have seen the current structure, school safety is actually buried fairly deep inside the organization, and it would be appropriate to elevate it on an accountability level directly to the superintendent. I think that that's one method that we can address some of the school safety issues that we've seen.
Because I've heard that from some of the police officers that work for LA Unified.
Yes.
Is that they don't seem to get the respect or the support from the superintendent or from I guess they do get it from the school board, but the relationship with the superintendent isn't as strong as it should be when it comes to safety and all the issues that we have regarding that. Another issue at Taft High School, this was right after the mayor took office. He and I were scheduled to go to the school and meet with some students, and there was an outbreak of some violence with Latino and African American students.
Right.
Created quite a fear out there. We then set up a meeting to have the parents all get together. The parents from the Valley showed up, the other parents didn't show up, there was no transportation. And you commented about neighborhood schools. When we're busing children from one part of the city to the other and expect the parents to come for a meeting at 6 o'clock in the evening during the work week, it doesn't seem to work. Did you find that disconnect with that lack of community schools or students being transported from South LA to the Valley or the West LA to South LA or whatever the heck they're doing on transportation, and the disconnect with the parents and the formation of alliances with the school, the teachers and the PTA, et cetera?
I can ask you to press your button after this, Mr. Zine, if you have other questions.
Okay.
after this.
I just have one follow-up and that'll be done.
Did you want me to respond
Yes,
to
please,
that?
if you could, please.
Historically, it has been well documented that there is a lack of community, especially by parents of traveling students. And because the travelers come from areas like Mr. Park's district, where there are already problems in the community, it is a huge, huge issue. When I worked for the school district, we struggled with providing support for those students because transportation is so costly. When I left and I was with the Annenberg Project, we actually funded the Taft, what we call the Taft School Family, to create special activities and to provide incentives for parents and their families to come into the Taft area, and we were quite successful. They had a family reading fair and really brought hundreds of people into the schools, into the Taft High School area. But absent those funds that come from specially targeted grants or whatever, you don't have it built into the general fund. And that's one of the things that schools can decide to do if they had access to their own funds, to their own budgets. But it is a growing concern. Let me just tell you, though, that this issue of disengagement hits across all schools, whether they are neighborhood schools or not. There is a certain element. They're not all like Mr. Rosendahl schools that, you know, it's a nice, quiet little neighborhood. You don't have busing, you don't have high levels of crime, whatever. There is a huge disengagement factor across Los Angeles, regardless of socioeconomic level. When we were in Sherman Oaks and had a public hearing, many parents spoke to us about this distance between them and the schools.
And just one final question. There's a number of schools in my district that are vacant, that are abandoned. Did you look into the abandoned schools throughout the district where the property just sitting collecting dust and weeds? The
no.
numbers of parcels?
We have not looked at that, but I'm sure if we had a facilities or a joint use agreement about these facilities, we could recommend that to you.
Okay.
That's an intriguing issue, the whole question of abandoned schools. This is the first we've heard any discussion on that at all. I mean, what we have heard is the overcrowding as opposed to the abandonment issue. So that's something we certainly will take back to the group.
There's definitely overcrowding in certain parts of the city. In other parts of the city, there's a number, in my district in particular,
Thank you, Mr.
a
Zahn.
number of abandoned schools. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Mr. Huizar and then Mr. Padilla.
Thank you very much. And I was just talking to my colleague Bill Rosenthal about how much I appreciate when I get on his show that he appreciated the role I was in, making $24,000 a year and being pulled in every which direction to ultimately be responsible for the performance of the district, and it was indeed a tough job. So thank you very much, Mr. Rosenthal, for your appreciation at that time and continued appreciation here. I wanted just to briefly commend this council. I think the thoughtfulness, the discussion that occurred was a very, very good one and continuing to go forward. And I think this lends some thoughts and ideas, at least to our two chairs of this commission, about what the council's thinking, what are the thoughts out there, and how do we continue to work together to go forward. And I just wanted to also briefly mention that this is very different from my experience at the school board. When I first brought forward this idea of creating the commission at the school board, I got fought back. People thought it was a bad thing. People didn't want to do this. They thought the motivations were bad ones. But you know what? And that's what we're facing at the district. People are there to defend the status quo. And whatever we go through, it's going to continue to be a tough one. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of naysayers, as the ones I faced when I brought forward the idea to the school district, to the school board, about making this commission possible. And I did face some ostracization, is that a word? Ostracization when I was there after for a few weeks, a couple of weeks when I presented this idea. But I think it's a very good one, and the fruits are really going to be good ones. Like Councilmember Cardenas mentioned, we're going to look back one of these days and say that this was a commission that spurred and went forward and did something, and not just create a report and put it somewhere on the shelves. Finally, two final points. One is, we know this is not the cure-all. It's not going to give us automatic test scores that are going to skyrocket, but at least it creates a structure, a better structure, to make that possible in the long term. This is more about long-term thinking, rather short-term things we can do now to improve instruction and student achievement in the classroom. And let's not lose sight of that. So when people say, why are you guys talking about governance? That's not going to improve student achievement. In fact, it will in the long term. And finally, decentralization. I cannot say enough about that. This district right now is a highly centralized system that when I was there, I was fighting against, trying to make it more decentralized, to give local schools more, or local districts, more control over their budget and curriculum. What we have in the east side is not the same as the valley. We need to focus our resources on the needs of the students at each school, and we're not doing that right now, and I know that's been a big discussion in your commission. Again, thank you to the two chairs of this commission. You put a lot of time into this, a lot of thoughtfulness, and that's what we need in order to come up with something that we could all work with at the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, we are down to a bare quorum, just to let people know. Mr. Padilla?
Thank you, Mr. President. And I, too, like Mr. Huizar said, have enjoyed the conversation for a couple of reasons, because we've really put our hands into this task over the last year since we first set up this commission. I'm glad to see that everybody has been paying attention. Everybody is chiming in. When the report comes back from the commission in June, that should not be the first time people around this horseshoe are considering the report before them. We should have been an active participant in the discussion. As I mentioned when I first spoke, that I was eager to get to the then what conversation. While other people are focused on mayoral control or not, and I'll speak to that in a minute, the then what conversation. So a couple of ideas, a couple of items that I believe the commission has already been thinking about. People made reference to the tremendous school construction program. More than, $15 billion in school construction? $19 billion? That's more than the Big Dig in Boston. That's a lot of schools that are being built, a lot of classrooms that are being built. That's great for relieving overcrowded schools. That's great for class size reduction. But what about the next question? Who's going to teach in each and every one of those classrooms? Where's the focus on quality teacher recruitment, teacher training, teacher retention, in addition to teacher accountability? Mr. Cardenas made reference to the job of a school board member and the nature of it being part-time with very little compensation, something that Mr. Wisat can attest to from firsthand experience. We know that a significant amount of their time is spent on the construction-related matters, whether it's relocation hearings, project management, etc. That comes back to the very fundamental question of the role and responsibility of a school board member. What should be their first and foremost priority? And is their job structured to pay more attention to those priorities? Part of what makes it more challenging is what Mr. Cardenas mentioned, the fact that they're not considered or treated technically full-time. I think another element of it is just the sheer size of a school board district. Here we have a Los Angeles Unified School District larger than the city of Los Angeles with only 7 members. Colleagues, if we think our districts are big, as we represent 250,000 people, imagine having a district 2.5 times the size and only working part-time. How does that make you accessible and accountable to your constituency? So either together or separate from the proposal to make school board members full-time, one of the things I'd ask the Commission to consider is expanding the size of the school board and in essence reducing the size of the district so that there's a better ratio between parents, not just voters, but parents, and their school board representative, ensuring more access, more accountability. I know my time is up, but I have just another couple of points I want to make. We talked a lot about plenty of room for partnerships between the school district and the cities, plural, that it serves. I think there's a lot of room for the city of Los Angeles in particular to play a very supportive role when it comes to LA Unified. We already fund after-school programs. We talk about working together to site and build these new schools, but are we really putting our planning procedures in close link? I think not, from personal experience. We talked about public safety. School district has their own police department. When there's a big problem on any particular campus, guess who gets the phone call? It's LAPD. So what's the formality of that arrangement? What's the proper linkage? Mr. Cunningham made reference to CompStat, not just participating, school district police participating in CompStat procedures, but are incidents on school campuses incorporated into our CompStat, the very data that we're seeking to analyze? I think that's appropriate because what happens on a school campus, particularly violence between and amongst our young people, is not happening in isolation on those campuses. It's a reflection of what's going on in the surrounding community. There's got to be those data linkages. One of the first steps that we're taking to document what the city of LA is doing already in its supportive role to the school district is item 44 on today's agenda. We just approved it via unanimous vote. It's asking every department of the city to report via the CLA on how we're working with the school district already. What are the programs? How much money are we contributing towards that? And so in short order, we'll offer to the Commission a very specific inventory of the resources that we're committing. And last but not least, something that Mr. Rosendahl talked about earlier. Mr. Rosendahl asked on a couple of occasions on this issue of mayoral control. And as a lot of people are grappling with that question, I want to bring to light a very important distinction. Let's not confuse mayoral control with Antonio control. If the city and the school district moves in the direction of mayoral control, it's a systemic change. It's an important consideration because who will be the future mayors of Los Angeles? Would we be as excited about this proposal if it was Mayor Hahn, if it was Mayor Reardon? So a lot of people are very emotionally engaged in this debate. But let's understand that the proposals for mayoral control is a true systemic change, a structural change for education in Los Angeles. And I know Mr. Garcetti touched on it. Any proposal for mayoral control, there's only there's two ways of getting something on the ballot for the voters of Los Angeles. Either the council votes to put something on the ballot, and I haven't heard yet in any of these proposals what role, if any, the council should play on mayoral control or appointed school board members or superintendent selection or any of those matters. The other way of getting something on the ballot is via referendum. And that's a costly proposition, something that costs either through dollars or through sweat equity. The signatures, verified signatures of no less than 200,000 voters in Los Angeles. So, colleagues, I hope that we're all stepping up in the conversation to ask not just about the roles and responsibilities of the city of Los Angeles, but this body specifically. And last but not least, I appreciate both Mr. Cunningham and Ms. Casillas' acknowledgement of my staff and Mr. Huizar's staff on this commission. I too just want to thank personally Bill Mabee for the hours and hours and hours he's put into this process so far. Thank you
very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Padilla. And thank you all very much. If we can open the roll on this and close the roll and tabulate the vote.
10 eyes.
That is noted and filed. Thank you very much, and thank you for your time and for your good work to the chairs of the committee. Next item, please.
Next item, Mr. President, is item number 22, and that was called special by Council President Garcetti.
Thank you, Madam President, and wanted to take up, actually, if we could, 22 and it's 26?
25.
25 together, if we may, in which we are looking to continue to make Hollywood an example of what we can do with transportation in Los Angeles, kind of a laboratory for how we can get away from single people in single cars. I don't mean unmarried, but individual people in individual cars, which is really the root of so much of our city's traffic. And in looking at some of the options that are out there, there have been companies that have evolved. FlexCar is one of them, but there are 3 or 4, with the idea of having a shared car in which people pay one membership fee or one fee for the year and then have the option of taking cars when they need them and taking them to places throughout the city. Essentially, it's kind of like what people do with bicycles in Amsterdam, in Holland, or other places in which there's shared transportation. To make this possible in Hollywood, we're looking at the idea of having certain parking spaces in our Hollywood city-owned garages and lots be set aside for folks that are using FlexCar. We're working with developers or other companies who would also use this shared car concept to put some of the spaces in their developments, especially when they're right around our subways, right around our public transit, to allow us to be able to have those transportation options. There are many people who only need a car once or twice a week, and yet they have a car that they use 6 or 7 days. And basically we have parking, which makes the ratio reflect the idea that people need their car every single day to drive. Well, we know that we can make this a more traffic-free city. We know that we can make Hollywood a better place for traffic to move through if we encourage people to use these shared car programs. So we have 2 items before us. Item 22, which is taking position on state legislation, which my predecessor and friend Jackie Goldberg at the state level is doing to make this possible in our municipal code, to be able to single out that we can take some of these parking spots and prioritize them in order to give some incentive for people to use this shared car concept. Item 25 is relative to this car share pilot program in Hollywood, and I want to thank Department of Transportation for working with us on this, that if we have in our legislative program this change in the state code, that we would then look at an ordinance with the city attorney's office is drawing up to be able to have these specific car share spaces in Hollywood. This joins really a whole menu of choices for residents in the Hollywood area. You can take one of 3 rapid bus lines. You can take the Red Line subway. There is a bike hotel that we actually are building out along the subway so that people can bring their bikes, park them at the bike hotel while they get on the subway and go to work. All of these links with dash lines, and then, of course, our traditional cars, and then the Holly Trolley, which is a way at nighttime of circulating in Los Angeles. And all of those together, I think, are the package that we need. And
Mr.
I urge your
Garcetti,
support.
we just
Thank
lost
you.
a quorum. We just lost our quorum. Okay. Can we see if we can get the council person who just left the council floor to see if we can get the quorum back?
Okay.
We're going to try and get him back in and get the quorum back. Just give it a second.
Jose. Yeah, you've earned the frequent flyer miles. Oops. That's on your watch.
Quorum is back. All right, Mr. Garcetti, you can
And in
finish your
conclusion,
time.
I urge your support. Thank you.
Very good. Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Colleagues, I want to acknowledge the leadership of Mr. Garcetti on this item. We had an opportunity to talk about this in Transportation Committee and the importance of thinking outside the box and looking at ways in which we can deal with transportation issues. And the legislation by Assemblymember Goldberg will help us implement this on a citywide basis. What's before us today is, as Mr. Garcetti mentioned, a support of her legislation, but also to draft an ordinance that allows us to do this in city parking lots right now. What Ms. Goldberg had, and it's, I think, based on Mr. Garcetti's motion, is to actually allow us to do this on public streets, which takes state legislation. But as we know, and we look at a seamless system of transportation opportunities in Los Angeles, part of that is ensuring that when you get off, whether it be at the red line or get off the orange line, that you can get to your next location, whether it be through a dash service or a shared vehicle. This is something that many other cities across the country have contemplated and worked, and I think the city of Oakland has implemented a similar program and a valet program that we're looking at across the state of California. So this is a way in which we can look at environmentally as well as looking at ways in which we can do this in a transportation-related item. So I stand in support of this and look forward to its implementation, and that it no longer is just a pilot program, but is a citywide program that helps us deal with our transportation and environmental issues. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you, Ms. Gruhl. Mr. Cardenas.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to point out that according to our agenda, as of today, there still is no CLA or CAO report on both of these items. It doesn't sound like the fiscal impact would be anything more than marginal, if anything at all, but I just wanted to ask the CLA if they could follow up with a report on this. I'm in support of the two items, but I'd like to have that on the record so that we, in case somebody does question it or what have you, we have done our analysis and we know what the impact is, if any at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cardenas. There are no further speakers. Madam Clerk, would you open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote?
10 ayes.
Thank you very much. Next item?
Next item is item number 24, and that was called special by Councilmember Padilla.
Mr. Padilla.
Is there staff here from DOT on this item? Well, first of all, thank you for your patience. It's been a long morning, and
Sure.
There's been some great council discussion on other items. But my questions are not specific to the item before us in terms of the contracts, I guess, or proposals, but they are definitely DASH-related, and I want to understand if there's anything from today's agenda item that affects or speaks to at all the strike that took place yesterday that impacted DASH service throughout the city, particularly in the San Fernando Valley.
Yes, Jim Lefton with the Department of Transportation. There was a strike action taken on Monday morning of this week by drivers of First Transit, who is our contracted operator for the Community Dash Package 3 services, which are in the San Fernando Valley. Package 3 is a separate contract from Package 5, which is before you on the item on the agenda today. We do have service, replacement service up. The contractor has been able to pull resources from other contracts to continue operating service, albeit at a reduced level. We're hoping that possibly by the end of this week, that we'll be up to close to 100% of the service that's scheduled. And we do have a lot of information out there, press releases, rider alerts, website, et cetera, transit store, letting riders know about what's going on so that they are aware of the situation, and we'll continue to give them updates as the strike progresses, and hopefully will be resolved shortly.
Okay. And I appreciate Councilmember Grewal bringing in a motion that'll be considered in Transportation Committee tomorrow to get into more details of what happened with the strike and its impact on service. But you said Package 3 versus Package 5. You know, how are they separate and apart from each other?
We have one contract currently with First Transit, which includes Packages 1, 2, and 3 within the city, Package 3 being in the valley. Package 5 is a completely separate contract, and that's made up currently of a number of different contractors, and we're putting it together into a package we're calling Package 5. And the recommendation here would be to give it to from the T Committee would be to give to a combination of MV Transportation and Connex Transportation. So First Transit would not be involved in this new contract for Package 5.
So there's no contractors in Package 3 that are part of Package 5?
No.
Okay, well,
Completely
that's
separate.
important to know, because if we're having problems with contractors under one package, it would make no
Right.
sense
Right.
to move forward with another package that
These
could
are
experience the same
completely separate,
problems. And just for a minute, again, I know it'll be considered in committee tomorrow, but can you tell us what the gist is of the labor issues there in Package 3?
In general, it's wages and health benefits, and I know that there's a federal mediator involved, and they are currently discussing, so we're hopeful that something will be resolved shortly.
Has the city been involved?
Again,
Excuse me, I think if we could tailor it to the Package 5 issues or how the labor
Well,
disputes
I ask these
affect...
questions so that we can learn from it, so we don't have developing issues in Package 5.
Keep tying it back in.
Could you rephrase the question again? I'm sorry.
No, just what's the essence of the problems that are surfacing in Package 3 so that we don't experience the same difficulties in Package 5?
Well, as I said before, that they're negotiating over health benefits and wages and benefits basically are the issue, and I know that there is a federal mediator that is involved trying to bring some resolution to the matter, and we're hopeful that it'll be resolved shortly.
Okay. And is there any opportunity for the city to play a role here in the resolution?
We generally don't play a role because, again, the contractor has submitted a proposal indicating that they'll operate the service at a certain cost over the 5-year term, and we generally hold the contractor responsible for meeting the terms and conditions at the cost that they propose. So we really try to stay out of labor negotiations because that could tend to pull the city into potentially being liable for paying additional costs associated with our activities. So we certainly encourage the contractor to bring it to try to get it resolved, and if there is a strike, to have ample or adequate resources to continue to provide the service, but not to get directly involved in the negotiations.
Okay. Well, colleagues, I'll just preface tomorrow's conversation with the following. The City of Los Angeles has led the country with the Living Wage Ordinance, with the Service Worker Retention Ordinance, now with the Grocery Worker Retention Ordinance. There's nothing to prevent us from playing a role if we choose to, and if we find it consistent with the spirit and the principles of this body, which is not just to look only at the bottom line, but ensure that all contractors are providing services for the people of Los Angeles, but only in a way that's respectful and just for their employees. So thank you for your report today, and we'll look forward to seeing you in committee tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Padilla. Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you, Madam President. Appreciate the opportunity to speak on this issue. Please have a seat. There's low ridership on the DASH program. Why?
There's low ridership on the DASH program. I would argue that ridership is doing very well on the DASH. We have, in last year, carried about 28 million passengers on the DASH system, which is an all-time high. It's a very successful program. There are services that do better than others, naturally, and we have, based on council-adopted guidelines, we rank all the services that we operate, and we can tell you which routes are better performing, which routes are poor performing. But overall, I'd say that we're doing very, very well.
I appreciate your aggressive response to that because I wanted to make sure we talk about ridership. There are two proposed routes in my district, the 11th district. One is a Venice area route within Venice, and another is Palms that ties it into Culver City as well. The question that the Venice people constantly ask me is, when's the dash? When can we get on the dash? How does it all work? If you could respond to those two proposed lanes that I know are problematic at this point.
Long story short, the department, a little over a year ago, conducted a study, a citywide study of where new dashes should be implemented. We get requests virtually from every council office, almost on a daily basis, it seems, for new dash service. And with very limited resources, we have a significant shortfall in our Proposition A funds, which are used to fund transit. We did a study to try to determine if we had the funds, where would new services go, where they should be located. So we took a detailed look at our existing services and what made a dash successful. We looked at all the demographic and economic information throughout the city and came up with a list of the top 22 dash services throughout the city, ranked from 1 to 22. That was brought forward and approved by the council in June of 2005. So that's been adopted by the council, kind of a priority pecking order of where new services should be implemented. Again, the big issue at this point is funding. As I mentioned before, we have about a $150 million projected shortfall in Proposition A over the next 10 years. And so we need to consider how we're going to be able to continue operating our existing services with that shortfall. There does not appear to be, short of a massive infusion of new money coming in, the ability to implement any new services at this point in time. That's the unfortunate reality. We did go through a significant amount of expansion for about 10, 15 years, but we've reached a point now where the funding hasn't been able to keep up.
29 million, you say, use it now?
Excuse me?
How many people use the dash service?
Including Dash Downtown, about 28 million passengers.
28 million people. And if you had your way with your wish list, how many more people would be serviced by it?
I'd like to implement all 22 of those routes. We would as well, but again...
How many more people would that add?
That probably... We're in about 27 community dash routes now, so adding another 22, you could be looking at another 15 to 20 million passengers.
Well, I'm for that, and if I want to spend my money properly around the city, it would be on the DASH program, would be one. So I look forward to a more aggressive proposal back from you in this budget process, how 24 more routes will add another 10 to 20 million more passengers. My seniors all want to take a dash. We have very little dash in the 11th district. They would like to use it. They'd like it marketed to them. Neighborhood councils have brought it up to me as well as other community groups. And you know my district is gridlocked, and one way around it is to have more dash buses. That's less automobiles. But more importantly as well, for my seniors, an opportunity to get around the dash. Would you explain the senior program real quickly about vouchers?
Yeah, we have a separate program from the DASH. We have a program for seniors and persons with disabilities called City Ride. We provide subsidized script, which you can use on several different options, including taxis, city franchise taxis. You can use it on a city-operated dollar ride service, and you can use it to buy discounted MTA bus passes, any combination, whichever fits your travel patterns.
So what do they make? They call you? They call a number? 311?
There's a City Ride number that you can call, and there's a brochure that we put out that you can fill out an application. You can also go online and fill out the application and submit it, and get you to be a member. And again, for a very low cost of $72, we get you the subsidized script.
Could you get me that info so I can give it to the neighborhood councils in my district so that they can plug in?
Yeah, we did. In fact, we sent it to one of your deputies.
Last week,
Yeah.
at the end of last week, yeah, and I want to thank you for answering those questions. But that'll get the word out among the seniors.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have before us, as Mr. Padilla mentioned, this is Dash Package 5, which has been extended several times in the last several months for us to be able to deal with some of the outstanding issues to ensure that we have community participation, that we have a service that is delivered, that we also look at the future, not only in Dash Package 5, but Dash Package 3, with the project First Transit recently asked to get out of an existing contract, as many of you know, that came before the City Council. Dash service has become another one of those seamless aspects of our transportation system, and so critical, as you mentioned, Mr. Rosendahl. And so we were concerned. The department has kept my office as well as Mayor Villaraigosa's office. We've been working closely with them and the department on the First Transit. That's why we introduced Dash Package 3, a motion today that allows us to have a special agenda item tomorrow in our Transportation Committee to get a full briefing, because that was the city attorney indicated that to be able to do that, we needed to have that motion. Otherwise, we would have considered that today in the City Council. But what you have before you in Dash Package 5 is something that allows us to move forward, to provide the services, to work with two companies in that area. You'll hear a lot about bundling and unbundling as we come forward with future contracts for other parts of the city. We have a new RFP that the department has been working on very quickly to go out to bid, and looking at how we can provide better service, to hold people accountable, to look at ways in which we can leverage some of our projects, and look at some kind of community benefits as well, and how we partner with our neighborhood groups. So you're going to hear a lot about Dash in the future, both because of some of the contracts coming up, but also to deal with the issue of the strike, particularly in the San Fernando Valley. Mr. Rosendahl, I think citywide, if I'm correct, Jim, is we're coming back. There's an RFP that's been let out, and you'll be soon coming back with recommendations for the providers. And I think I have some concerns about some of the voucher programs with the taxi services, et cetera, because some are refusing to take someone to various areas. So we're going to have, in our Transportation Committee, a good discussion about Dial-A-Ride and the City-Ride, the importance of providing that for our seniors, and what is most cost-effective and delivers the best services. So I'm going to stick, hopefully, within my 20 more seconds. But we look forward to the report tomorrow in Transportation Committee to make sure we've provided the services, and that we are having whatever employees are part of our contracts that we have in the city, that they're being provided with the appropriate, I think, wages and health care, and that will be part of our discussion tomorrow as well. And so thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Ms. Groh. That was perfect. Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, with adaptive reuse, we've changed the patterns of our residential neighborhoods in a dramatic way. What was formerly manufacturing industrial zones have now been filtered in with residential. And it begs the question of how we look at our city and how we look at our Dash system. Most cities have 3 layers of transit opportunities. In our particular city, we have failed to look at our neighborhood routes, especially when you look at our rail stations. Along the GO line, we don't have a Dash system that intersperses itself between the hillside communities and the flatlands. We have the transit-dependent folks who could actually think about not taking their car or having to join someone else with 2 or 3 other 4 other passengers because of their low-income status. They have no options. They have to walk through long corridors, usually unsafe streets, to get to the rail station, and then we wonder why our ridership isn't high on our rail lines. The interconnectivity here, colleagues, is one in which if we can start moving a different sense of priority within our transit departments, including the planning department and how it looks at its transit unit, and we reassess and redefine based on what our constituents feel are desirable destination points, your ridership will increase tremendously. In Westlake, for example, in the mid-90s, we were told we could not move a Dash line where it currently exists in the Pico Union area up to Echo Park, because it didn't meet the traditional destination points as defined by the transit engineers. While we asked them to put that aside, we let the community determine that. Now it's one of the highest ridership routes in the city. It actually has such a high load of passengers that it probably carries other lines that don't have a high number of passengers. So colleagues, I'm sharing these thoughts with you because in this package, as we look at the expansion of these routes, what other routes can we stimulate and acknowledge the market we're in? We have a regional market, we have the citywide market, and then we have the local markets. And that's where I think the dash can cause great relief as we look at these packages in the future. So I thought I'd beat the city attorney to the punch on that one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. There are no further speakers in the queue. Madam Clerk, please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
10 eyes.
Our next item.
Council has motions for posting and referral.
Posted and referred.
And that clears the desk.
Item number 25, go forthwith, sorry. Or 24, sorry, 24, that we just approved.
And that clears the desk.
Thank you.
Any announcements? All right, let's see. Any announcements on this side? None? Mr. Parks?
Wendy just did it.
Did you have an announcement?
Yes,
Okay,
several.
okay. Oh, great, yes.
First of all, thank you, Mr. President. Crenshaw Christian Center will have their annual Community Task Force on Wednesday, on March 24th at 8 to 12 at their facility at 83rd in Vermont. Also, the African American Summit on Violence Prevention will hold their next meeting on Friday on March 24th at 7:30 to 9 at the Doolin's Restaurant at 4859 Crenshaw Boulevard. Contact information is 323-737-0841. Also, the Community Public Sector Expo is Wednesday, March 29th at USC, in which they are bringing vendors on campus so that students will be aware of employment opportunities. You must contact the university by Wednesday, the 22nd of March. Contact number 743-5264. And then also, just to make everyone aware that the 13th Annual Economic Awards Dinner for the Greater Los Angeles African American Chamber will be held on Thursday, March 23rd, and this will be at 5:30 for the reception, 7 for dinner, and it will be at the Sheridan Los Angeles downtown at 711 South Hope.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parks. Any other announcements on this side? Okay, Mr. Reyes, any announcements?
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to invite everyone. We are going through our 18-month process of revisioning the Alley River. We had some very, very strong attendance. And one meeting, we had almost 600 individuals. Meetings will be held on Saturday, March 25th in the San Fernando Valley area, Birmingham High School, 10 a.m. to 12:30. On Tuesday, March 28th, 6 p.m. to 8:30 at Glassell Park Elementary School. On Wednesday, March 29th, in the East LA area, we'll have it at the International Institute of Los Angeles. Again, folks, this is a time where we will listen to you. You tell us what you want to see, the greening of the river, bike paths, parkways, mixed use, commercial housing, natural habitats. In some areas, we can do some of it, maybe in other areas, all of it. It's all up to you. Help us create the vision for the river. It's your river, it's your city. So you're welcome to come. You can call 323-669-9100, or you can look us up online at www.alleyriver.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you, Madam President. Just some good news. Yesterday, I went to Ontario Airport, and we're talking about regionalism in a real sense these days. We did the flyaway the other day from Union Station to LAX, and what I learned in Ontario, we cut a ribbon. They've redone their runway, and what this will do is provide an opportunity not only for the new jets, the A380s, but more of the other jets that aren't there now. Right now, 7 million MAP takes place in Ontario. The facility could handle 11 million, and with some simple retooling, we can go up to 30 million. There happens to be mass transit lines right on the edge of the property, a metro line on one side and the potential of the GO line on the other. And so what we need to do is work with the airlines and convince them that direct, nonstop, discounted, and frequent flights make sense out of Ontario. We had the mayor of Ontario there, we had the county supervisor from San Bernardino, and the combination of energy for regionalism was demonstrated yesterday. Ontario's doing a great step forward, and I look forward to the airlines beginning to put more direct, nonstop, frequent, and discounted flights out of Ontario. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. Any other announcements? All right. Any adjourning tributes? Mr. Cardenas.
Thank you very much. It's with great sadness that I announce that Marco Antonio Fireball, former state assemblyman, passed away at 7:30 a.m. this morning. He was 39 years old. He had a big heart and a very smart mind. He served in the state legislature from 1998 to 2004 as a state assemblyman. He rose to be the majority floor leader in 2002 under the leadership of then Speaker and current colleague Herb Wesson. I spoke to Herb Wesson this morning, and he couldn't be here today, but he asked that I repeat what he said this morning. He said Marco Fireball was the best. He was the best. And also he was the best majority floor leader ever in the State Assembly. I agree with him on that. Marco Fireball was a true leader, not only as an elected official, but as a human being. He had the determination and the intellect and the ability and the skill to successfully pass major legislation in the state of California. Even when there was great opposition, even when it was difficult to get, whether it be a Democrat or Republican governor, to sign something, he was successful. One of the most marquee legislation that he passed was known as AB 540, which brings a better equality and respect and accountability of California to respect and appreciate the young people who are here, even though their parents are undocumented, and even though their parents may have brought them here as early as 2 and 3 and 4 years old, yet they're here living and sometimes assuming that they're American, and find out, unfortunately, that they can't get into our universities, and AB 540 has changed that. Marco Fireball was a personal friend of mine, and Marco Fireball was someone who fought very hard for things that are very important. He was a change maker. Just recently, he appeared before the Budget Committee on a very important matter that has to do with having the right kind of representation, and a good thing happened in Los Angeles, like having, for the first time, a permanent Latino museum. And in addition to that, having a repertoire that is more permanent, having to represent the Mexican and Latino community here in Los Angeles when it comes to the arts. It's something that he worked for. Not only did he work for it, he made sure that we got several $1 million in state legislation earmarked for that project. And that's the kind of change maker that Marco Fireball was. He put everything on the line, and he did it for all the right reasons, and he never did anything for himself. He was a selfless person, and he died too young. And I also would like to say that Marco was an example of the changing California, and all for the better. I remember one time we had a very intense discussion where I needed his vote on the floor of the State Assembly, and we talked for several minutes, and we went through some very intricate details about the bill. And then when I asked him if I could have his vote after discussing all the things and answering all of his questions, and I quote him, he said, "I'm with you, dog." I say that lovingly and respectfully because he got his bachelor's degree at UCLA. He got his law degree as well. He could traverse many communities, many lifestyles, and he understood people in many, many factions. And I remembered having discussions on that floor with Republicans and Democrats about that bill as I was collecting votes. And he was the only one that lovingly and respectfully said that to me. And I looked at him and smiled, and we had a good laugh, and I gave each other a hug, because basically what it was reminding me of, let's not get full of ourselves. Let's not get full of ourselves. We're doing important things here, but we're just folks from the neighborhood, and we have to remember who we represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cardenas. Ms. Gruhl.
I just want to add as well, Marco Fireball was someone that you saw him in the Sacramento airport, or you saw him here in Los Angeles. He was always working. He was always working the deal to get something for our region. He was up there fighting for, I think, the rights of so many people who didn't have a voice. and was someone who always had a smile and an intensity when you saw him, and met him for the first time when I think he was chair of the Latino caucus at that time. And he really, I think, took that organization and others that Mr. Cardenas was part of to another level, and fighting for all of us here. And just too young. I didn't realize he was only 39. And his family and all of us just know that his leadership, we had hoped, because he was just beginning his campaign here in Los Angeles, that he'd be able to go back to Sacramento and be our voice again. We are all shocked and saddened by his loss, and know that a fighter that we had has been lost to all of us, and that we will remember him and fight on for the causes that he fought for.
Thank you, Ms. Gruhl. Mr. Huizar.
Thank you very much. And I, too, rise with great sadness to add my thoughts and prayers with Marco Antonio Fariba and his family.
Mr. Padilla.
He was a good friend. Marco was a good friend. He went to school with him at UC Berkeley and later at UCLA Law School. We did a lot at UC Berkeley. We were, as he probably said often, he said, we were machistas, fighting to open up the university or shut it down. We often talked about how we were young kids in the 80s living in the 60s at UC Berkeley, doing a lot of things that we thought were right and just. And this is a person who did what he believed and wasn't shy about it. You know, his major legislation that he passed, AB 540, Mr. Cardenas said, it was a time when not many people would stand up for the undocumented. Not many people would stand up for the kids who did everything right and played by the rules and got good grades, but were denied a college education because they could not afford one. And he was someone who, when I decided to run for the school board back in 2001, I first talked to Riordan, and Riordan said, Jose, I'd love to endorse you for this race, but go find some elected officials who will endorse you in the district. I went to my good friend Marco Antonio, and he represented the Southeast cities at the time. The district at the time covered the Southeast cities: Southgate, Huntington Park, Maywood, Cudahy. And at that time, you know, Marco was playing the pseudo board member. He was the one standing up for education. He was the one making sure that the district was responsible in building schools there for an area that had been neglected for years and not building adequate schools. And we all know that there, along with the central city of Los Angeles, one of the most overcrowded areas for schools in the United States. But he not only was in the trenches fighting in the Southeast cities, but he sat on the state allocation board, played a major role in allocating matching funds here locally to build schools, and he, along with others, fought a fight to change the way and the formula, the way the state allocation board gives money to local school districts to build schools. It used to be on a first-come, first-served basis, and that left many large school districts like LAUSD in the back of the line, and he fought hard to change that formula and was responsible, along with others, to get a lot of the money we got here at LAUSD to build our schools. And so I went to Marco Antonio and asked him if I could get his support for the race, and he went around and introduced me to many other electeds, including Councilmember Tony Cardenas and Alex Padilla and others around this horseshoe, and introduced me to many people who decided to back up my candidacy. And I was lucky enough to practically walk into that seat thanks to the help and work of Marco Antonio Fariba, who introduced me to a lot of folks. But we continued our relationship after that, and I've always admired the work he did, because he was one of those who, like I said earlier, wasn't ashamed or to fight for the things he believed in. When I was on the school board and we had those tough fights and trying to convince the city council members of the Southeast cities to give us a chance, don't break away from the LUSD at the time, give us a chance, we're going to build these schools. He would fly down for 1 or 2 hour meetings from Sacramento to attend community meetings with parents, to hear the concerns and fly back up. Someone who really cared deeply about the work he was doing. Someone who I'll miss.
Mr. Padilla.
He's still with us, Jose, and we have a spirit to continue. Want to join in this tribute to adjourn in the memory of Marco Firebaugh, who I've had the pleasure of knowing for more than 10 years. We'll speak to his legislative accomplishments in a minute, but I think those who know him also loved him and respected him for his commitment and devotion to his two children, Ariana and Nicolas. Marco himself was one of 7 children born to impoverished Mexican immigrant parents, and against the odds went on to graduate, as has been said, from UC Berkeley and law school at UCLA. His introduction to the Capitol was as an Assembly Fellow, and not too many Assembly Fellows go on to become Assemblymen or Assemblywomen. He worked under the mentorship of Senator Richard Polanco. Senator Richard Polanco has been dubbed really the architect of Latino politics in California. If Senator Polanco was the architect, Marco Firebaugh in many ways was the builder, the contractor, implementing that plan. And the story of Jose Huizar is one of many stories that can be recounted around the state of California. He earned the chairmanship of the Latino caucus upon the retirement of Senator Polanco, served in that capacity from 2002 to 2004, when the caucus grew from just 22, an impressive number then, to 27 members just 2 years later. I had the even recent opportunity of working with him. Well, let me take it back just a second here because of the campaign work. I was blessed with an opportunity to assist him in his first campaign. In 1998, I was working as the Southern California field director for the California Democratic Party when Marco Firebaugh was first running for Assembly. And I remember many a hot Saturday afternoon at that hole in the wall, that dump of a place in Cudahy, that was converted into a campaign office. From the outside, you'd scratch your head and say, what would drive you to be in this neighborhood? Who would want to live or work here? But as you walked into a campaign headquarters and you see phone line after phone line humming and volunteer after volunteer coming through, working not so much for Marco Firebaugh the person, but what he represented, the issues that he championed, what he was about. It's no surprise that he was elected and served with such great effectiveness in his years in the Assembly. Just recently, he approached me for some help on a bill that he was carrying, one of the many bills that was introduced, maybe successful in the Assembly, maybe successful in the Senate, but either died in the Senate or died at the desk of the governor, but like Marco Firebaugh, was not the end of the bill. That bill will be reintroduced. That bill will be successful once again, and that bill will be signed by a future governor. And that was one that sought to protect the health of kids. The city of Los Angeles has done a lot from a leadership standpoint to reduce the unlawful sale of tobacco, to reduce the harmful effects of tobacco on children especially. There was a bill he had last session that required, or prohibited, I should say, prohibited smoking in a vehicle when there is a child present who is still young enough to be required to sit in a car seat. Just grasp the visual. A child that's required to sit in a car seat, riding in the vehicle, should you be allowed to smoke or not? Common sense issue. But believe it or not, there was opposition to that bill. But that bill will see a new day and will be approved. I had the honor of working directly with Marco Firebaugh on that legislation and to promote that legislation. Mr. Cardenas makes reference to AB 540, his crowning achievement, in my opinion, legislation that permits specifically California high school students to pursue a college education regardless of their immigrant status. We read about it every June, and June is coming up once again. how not just student after student, but valedictorian after valedictorian, who late in life realized that they were not born here. They were brought here by their parents with or without proper documentation. Students who go to and exceed in elementary school, go to and exceed in middle school, go to and excel at the high school level. Valedictorians amongst us. We just had a conversation today about the need to improve LA Unified, but when we have success stories, our country, until Marco Fireball came along, made it extremely difficult for them to attend state universities in California. No longer because of Marco Fireball, no longer because of AB 540, and now on to the next battle to actually raise money, because although undocumented students can graduate as valedictorians from public schools in California and go on to Cal State systems, they're still not eligible for financial aid in most cases, and certainly not entitled to pay in-state tuition in too many cases. So we have more work to do. Marco's legacy will live on in the works of all those immigrant students who now are able to access higher education. Many will go on to become doctors, and they're going to save lives. Many will go on to be teachers, and they're going to teach kids. Many will become artists and enrich our culture and society. And some might move on to naturalize and become elected officials and carry on the fight for justice. With all the talk going on at the state level and at the national level about immigration reform, let's not lose sight of the principles that this country stands on. And one of the fighters for those principles was Marco Antonio Fireball.
Thank you, Mr. Padilla. Also on Mr. Fireball, Mr. Reyes, and then Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you, Council President. I met Marco as a deputy. He was working the streets of Echo Park on Sunset Boulevard. This was probably the early 90s. And in him was a drive. He wanted to be inclusive. There was some jockeying going on between the Assembly and the City Council as to who was going to get all the community leaders and how we're going to work together. And it's a natural, healthy competition. But to see him go from that point, just learning what was happening on the streets to the halls of Sacramento, is a gift and accomplishments that our community will feel for many years. It's sad to see such a young person leave us at such a pivotal point in his life. So I'll always remember him, because he did look at the person who does not have a voice. He did focus on how we make real change. And when we are working in environments where folks live on the soundbite, the difficulty of what's happening to our communities now, especially with the laws that are coming from places that have no idea what's happening in our urban centers, that's the spirit that we're going to miss with Mr. Fireball. So with a heavy heart, I also want to adjourn on his behalf. Thank you.
Mr. Rosendahl.
Yes, Mr. President. It's not how long we live our life, but how we live it. And he's an example of that. I got the pleasure of doing the debates when he first ran for office, and I saw an incredible sense of humor and brilliance in him. And just the other day, he was here a month ago. We were hugging. He asked me how I liked being an elected official, but that's another story. But what he was here for was something he believed in. And he believed in what is right and good, especially for those who aren't getting the opportunities. And he fought every day of his life. So, you know, all we have is the moment. And at 39, he's left us, but his good works will stay with us. May he rest in peace.
Mr. Zion.
I met Marco when I first ran for office. We had the same fundraiser. I remember seeing him come into the office with energy and enthusiasm, and I used to hear his name when I was with the Police Protective League, Marco Fireball. There's got to be a lot of energy, got to be a lot of enthusiasm with that name. That's exactly what he was. And I remember going to the Capitol and meeting with Jim Brutti, Antonio Villaraigosa, our mayor, was then a council member, and we met, and Marco was ill at the time. And Jim Brutti from the Republican side was very concerned. And the discussion, the compassion, he had touched many, many people. in his life. And I didn't know he was 39 when Council President Garcetti mentioned his passing this morning. I was shocked because I know he had illness, but I know he was thinking he was going to get better. But the impact that he's had in listening to the comments from my colleagues that had a much closer relationship than I had with him, he made a lot of impact on the people in the state of California. Marco Fireball, may he rest in peace.
Thank you, Mr. Zine, and I would just say that a couple of us were outside right now celebrating the bicentennial of the birth of Benito Juarez, the great Mexican president who had a friendship with our own Abraham Lincoln, correspondence over the years, two great fighters for the civil rights and equality of all members of our human family. And Marco Fireball was definitely somebody who took that same vision, somebody who I called a personal friend, somebody who supported me very early on. I remember many wonderful discussions with him. He was somebody who gave you a lot of advice and mentoring, which isn't something that happens a lot in our profession, colleagues. But you know, it's always incredible to see somebody who's gone before you actually tell you how you can do an even better job serving the people. And he embodied a certain fearlessness, which Mr. Padilla spoke of, and intelligence, because you can have one or the other, but it's rare to have fearlessness and intelligence, and add a third thing to that, kind of a love of a fellow human being. And Marco Fireball certainly embodied that, and I was looking forward to his many, many more years in service. But let his time here inspire all of us. It's not just the passing of a friend, which it is, but the passing of somebody who's an inspiration to our daily work, to never be afraid to take on some of the toughest issues, never make the calculus on politics, but do what your heart says, and he will be sorely, sorely missed. All members on that, please. Are there adjourning motions, colleagues? Mr. Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues also ask that we adjourn in memory of Lenore Morales, a 68-year-old woman who recently passed away, born in Anthony, New York in 1938, but was a resident of Pacoima for more than 40 years. She was an active member of Mary Immaculate Catholic Church and the Louver Street Neighborhood Watch Group, not just respected, truly adored by her neighbors, and we will all miss her dearly.
Thank you. Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have two adjourning motions. First, I'd ask we adjourn in memory of Doug Hamilton, who was the President and General Manager of the Los Angeles Galaxy. He died in the last week from an apparent heart attack while on his way back from to the United States from Costa Rica. Doug was only 43, and he basically had taken the Galaxy to new height in his 3 years at the helm. He had been voted in as Executive of the Year. Under his guidance, the club won the Major League Soccer title in 2002. That was his first season, and then captured the U.S. domestic double, the Major League Soccer Cup and the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup this past season. He was unique in the fact he was in administration, but he also was a former player and coach himself. But just a tragic loss in the sense of the sports world.
Mr. Padilla would like to second that one.
And the other one is a person that was a personal friend and was a member of the Los Angeles Police Department for 30 years. And I'd ask Mr. Zine and Mr. Smith to second this, is that James Fisk, former Deputy Chief on the Los Angeles Police Department, he has a couple of distinctions in the city of LA. He was the first former police officer to serve as a police commissioner. He also was interesting that, go back in LAPD history, he was also the first person that actually came out #1 in the competitive testing for chief of police. He did it twice, and for some reason the city bypassed him and initially appointed Tom Redden, and then after Tom Redden moved on, they appointed Ed Davis. He was in a very unique class. When he graduated in the 40s, Ed Davis and future Mayor Tom Bradley were his classmates in the 1940 class. He was what they call a skyrocket. He went through the ranks, sergeant in 4 years, lieutenant in 4 years, made captain in 52. It was interesting at the time he was promoting, you could take the commander and deputy chief's exam at the same time, simultaneously. And he was denied promotion in the mid-50s, about 1955, as a deputy chief because they viewed him as being too young for the position. But right after the Watts riot, Chief Parker appointed him as the coordinator of community relations at the inspector rank. And he was known as Mr. Community Relations. He's the one that really brought community relations to LAPD. After Parker's death, he, as I mentioned, took the exam. Many people thought he would be the next chief of police, but Tom Redden received that honor. And then the second time, which you figured it would not be a second flash of lightning, but then Ed Davis became chief. He retired in 1970 after 30 years, and then Mayor Bradley appointed him to the police commission. What's unique is that he had a son that followed his career, and one of the tragic situations that turned into positive, Steve was involved in a very horrendous shooting, and it took such an emotional toll on him. He actually was pensioned off the department on psychological pension. And then when I was working in personnel function in the mid-'80s, we were able to bring him back to full duty, and he was an outstanding detective. In fact, he originally was a member of our SIS. I believe he retired out of the Valley as a Detective 3, but I'll never forget Steve when he was told he could come back on the department. He broke down and cried in the Personnel Training Bureau office because he never thought he'd have an opportunity to serve again. But I'd ask that we adjourn in a great person, James Fisk.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Other adjourning motions, Mr. Zine? Oh, sorry, Greg, did you have one? No, Mr. Zine?
Mr. President, I have two adjourning motions. Both of these members of law enforcement, Raul Wayna. Raul passed away March 19th during the LA Marathon. Los Angeles police detective. Raul Wayna was born in Los Angeles June 19th, 1952. Graduated from Montebello High School in June 1970. Immediately after graduation, he joined the United States Army, where he served overseas and received an honorable discharge in March 1972. Studied at East Los Angeles College, received an AA degree in 1977, and began his career with the Los Angeles Police Department July 5th, 1977. Over his 29-year career, worked at 77th Street Division, Newton Division, Operations Central Bureau Crash, Robbery Homicide Division, and his current assignment was a supervisor at Force Investigation Division. Detective Randall was recognized with over 50 commendations throughout his career. He was participating in his 5th consecutive LA Marathon when he collapsed and died of a heart attack. He'll be truly missed by his family and his family with the LAPD. He is survived by his wife, Teresa, sons Raul and Raymond, his mother, Angelita, and his brother, Art Reyna, who is a detective at Northeast Division. And his rosary viewing is going to be this Sunday at 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock in West Covina at Pierce Brothers. And the funeral will be Monday morning, March 27th at 10:30 at St. Christopher Catholic Church, 629 South Glendora in West Covina. May Raul Reyna rest in peace. And the other is a deputy retired from Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department that also passed away of a heart attack during the marathon on Sunday. James Leon, retired Los Angeles County Deputy Sheriff, 60 years of age, collapsed while running the marathon. Two runners interrupted their own run to administer CPR, but they never received a pulse. Leon lived in St. George, Utah, had traveled to Los Angeles to participate in his 11th LA Marathon. He was a 26-year member of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and had retired in July of 2000. He will be greatly missed by his family and friends, members of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. James Leon, may he rest in peace.
All members on both of those. Do you want to say something, Mr. Cardenas?
Announcement.
Oh, sure. Announcement, Mr. Cardenas?
Yes, ITA GSD committee is scheduled to commence at 2 o'clock. To give staff and everyone time to be prepared, we'll move that, we'll commence at 2:15 today instead of 2 p.m.
Okay. And one other last announcement, we congratulate in CD3 Taft High School, is that right? For winning the state academic decathlon with names that reflect all of Los Angeles. You look at the picture of the teammates, Zachary Ellington, Michael Farrell, Farhan Khan, David Lopez, David Novgrodowski, Julia Rebrova, Atish Sawant, Dean Schaefer, and Monica Shetler. We hope you will represent us proudly and take the national. And Mr. Zine?
Students to council for formal
Wonderful.
recognition along with the
Good.
mayor's office, and we wish them good luck in the national championship.
Thank you. Thank you all, colleagues. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. This meeting is adjourned.